Council Tavares and Council Waterman. All right, we have two people coming here tonight to speak. First, Linda Giammarino for the Board of Election Commissioners.
Good evening. My name is Linda Giammarino. I reside at 132 Locust Street here in Attleboro, and I'm here to run for the Election Commission. I just want you to know that I have always felt that one of the most important responsibilities we have as citizens is to participate in the electoral process. And I'm proud to have lived in Attleboro for over 40 years. I have been involved in the elections for over 20 years, and I have served many different posts, as from inspector to clerk and warden. And I would be very honored to be a part of the commission. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Well, I've known Linda for a long time, and I probably could have done it as a reappointment since she's done so much in the city, but I really wanted to have her come up and say hi to everybody and get to see her again because it's been a while, and I know she does a lot of great things for the city, and I'm looking forward to being on there because I think this is obviously, no questions, is a great fit for you, and I think the Election Commission is going to be that much better to have you on there.
Thank you very much.
Councilors, Councilor Waterman.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
We've met a few times.
We have.
And I'm very delighted that you are interested in this position. And with your experience, will help a great deal. What would you say is the biggest challenge for the election commissioners? Going in, what are you guessing are the challenges?
Well, having worked with them for many years, probably trying to get the people of the city to vote. I think it's important. Things can't be changed or helped unless the people get involved. And I think that I would try to be a catalyst to get more people. I know that they're having a problem even getting people to get the census back, and having been a warden for many years in 3 different wards, it's very difficult when people say, well, I turned my census in. I said, well, the city doesn't have it, or maybe you just forgot. But every time I had to sit down and go through that process with people who wanted to vote and trying to say, you need to do that in order to remain on the list as a voter. So I think that would probably be one of the priorities that I would like to help with right away.
That's great.
Well, you hit number 1 in my opinion.
It was very difficult as a warden when, especially presidential elections, and with one coming up, I know for a fact, I've heard that the percentage of the returns for the census has been very low. And I know it's difficult for them, and they're doing different things to sending postcards out. Please, do you still reside at this address, whatever. All you have to do is check the box. That's just one way to do it, but I know that they're having a really hard time.
All right.
Well, you're on TV now, so thank you.
There you go. Public service announcement. Any other questions? All right.
All set.
Great. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it very much, and look forward to seeing more of you soon.
Okay.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you very much for having me.
Enjoy vacation.
Thank you.
Ethan Matos for Council on Human Rights. I got a chance to meet Ethan last week, and very impressive individual, and I think he's got a lot to bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind words. This is Sandy. Well, you can probably hear me. I can project my voice. Anyways, my name's Ethan Matos. I reside at 45 Linden Street. I've actually been a resident of Attleboro for a little under a year. My dad moved here 6 years ago, but I lived abroad for about 4.5 years in Japan and the Netherlands. And then I moved back here and I'm currently living with my father. I am the community liaison and volunteer recruitment coordinator at a nonprofit organization called the Coalition for Social Justice Education Fund. And we focus on a lot of grassroots activism and organizing around different policy issues, things that are also important here in Attleboro, like public transit, affordable housing, environmental justice, affordable childhood care, and education. But the reason why I want to join the Council on Human Rights is I grew up in the Boy Scouts. I was in the Boy Scouts for 13 years, from 5 to 18. I attained the rank of Eagle. And something that I learned in the Boy Scouts that's always kind of followed with me my entire life is the saying, leave a place better than you found it. And I truly believe that it's very important to get involved in, what's happening locally in the town you're in. I think that that's kind of where you can make the biggest impact on the people around you. And I've always been someone who's wanted to make a positive impact in my community. Through my organization that I work at, we do a lot of civic engagement. So I really do know the importance of really being involved, getting to know people, setting up events that will help the community and bring the community together. And since moving back to Attleboro a year ago, I've just been very inspired by meeting different community members and seeing just how many people really care about the city and want to see it, become a better place. One of my first internship experiences was also actually at the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights. So I was an investigative intern there back in college where, we talked and worked around different human rights issues, investigating, cases of discrimination and human rights violations in the state of Rhode Island. So this is, a little bit return to form for me, I would say. But overall, yeah, I just really am looking forward to getting involved and making a difference within the city. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. I normally would go to Council Waterman or Council Tavares first, but I'm going to give this to Council Sawyer, as she has been on that committee for how long?
I was on it for 6 years, 5 years as chair, so I know it well. And I'm glad that you're coming to want to be part of the council. What are any of your, do you have anything that you're planning, anything that you want to do with the council when you once you're on it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and again, this is what I've learned from working with my organization, is that community events are a really great way to bring people together. In my mind, something like a discussion series around, human rights issues, that would be, both a discussion and a listening session. I think one of the most important things is, again, bringing members of the community together and finding out what is really important to them and what matters to them. As well as, giving back and being able to talk about these kinds of things in a setting that's maybe, a little less formal and can really encourage discussion. So definitely, yeah, one of the things that I think would be great would be kind of like an educational series, community discussion that could bring people together to really discuss issues that are important to them. Most recently I was just at the World Water Day cleanup that happened at the community garden this past weekend. Again, a really nice event to, give back and talk with other community members, and just small activities even like that, people can come together and work together to make the community a better place is something that I definitely want to see more of.
Great, can't wait to see what you're going to do.
Awesome, any other?
Sure, I'll
Council
shoot.
Waterman.
So I began also on the Committee for Human Rights Council and came here from there. If you were to guess, and this is purely guesswork right now, what would you say might be the most important human rights issue in a city like Attleboro?
I think that's a very good question. Not just in our community, but I think in a lot of communities, around the U.S., I think one of the most pressing things that we kind of see is the inability for people to come together and sort of cross any kind of divides that they might have, whether it's, a class divide, a race divide, those kinds of gaps. I know that some of the biggest topics right now have to do around things like diversity, and how to include people within the community. And so I would say that's probably, you know, one of them. And then, I mean, I know you only said one of them, but if I had to pick another two, it would definitely be housing and transit as well. I mean, you know, just this past weekend when we were doing the cleanup, we found, you know, an abandoned encampment in the woods. It was a mattress, a pillow, a couple of tents. And it's just really sad to see that there are people within our community who have to resort, you know, to that. So, you know, I definitely see these kinds of differences as one of the biggest things that we have to, you know, kind of close the gap on. But yeah, definitely just other issues that are affecting the way that people live as well.
Well, I think you're right on.
Yep.
Good luck.
Any other questions, comments? All right, great. Thanks, Ethan. Appreciate it.
Thank
Look
you so
forward to
much for
seeing
your
more of
time.
you. All right, take care. Okay, for the docket of April 16th, 2024, entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Linda G. Marino, 132 Locust Street, to fill an expired term of the Board of Election Commission's term to expire February 2028.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. Obviously, we just heard from Linda, and I think I feel that she's going to be a great addition. She's done a lot for the city, been here for many, many years, and this is a perfect fit for her. And any thoughts, comments, concerns? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. For the docket of April 16th, 2024, entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Ethan Matos, 45 Linden Street, to fill an expired term on the Council on Human Rights, term to expire February 2027.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. Obviously, we just heard from Ethan, and I think we're continuing to get a lot of great fits here. Ethan's going to be fantastic on the human rights, and I'm happy to see this happen and get going. All right, any questions, comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Let's see, okay, so we're gonna... all right. On the docket of April 2nd, 2024, entertain a motion to approve the 2% increase in the city's compensation plan for fiscal year 2025, effective July 1st, 2024, for employees in the exempt classification.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. So basically, we talked about this before, we brought it out, had to bring it back in. And this is just a COLA, cost of living increase for the exempt. Any questions? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, entertain a motion to approve the placement of local inspector to grade 7 and place the plans examiner to grade 8 in the exempt classification plan from the Attleboro Laborers Union, and add the title of veterinarian to Article 16, uniform and clothing allowance in the personal rules and regulations.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. So this is another one that we brought out, and then we had to bring back in and have the public hearing, which was on April 2nd. So a few things here. These are positions that are we're part of the union. We're bringing them into exempt, and this is going to just work better for their grade of experience that they have, that they're coming in with a lot of experience in. So instead of having them start at the bottom, they're starting at where their experience is, and that's why this move was made to take care of this. And then, you know, on the uniform and clothing, the veterinarian was a part-time position, and now it is a full-time position in exempt, and that is to handle the clothing allowance for that position. Any questions?
No.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the request to change the exempt classification plan, adding a guest services supervisor to the exempt classification plan for Park and Forestry, Capron Park Zoo. In addition, moving the position of curator of education from the Attleboro Laborers Association Local 1144 Laborers Contract to the exempt classification plan. Therefore, place the guest services supervisor to grade 4 and place the education curator to grade 6 in the exempt classification plan.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. So a couple things here. Again, we're going from the union and, you know, for these positions to making them exempt. So the guest services supervisor, we've had people in the past, like part-time, and not really being able to someone always coming and going. So now this is going to be a position that is going to handle it so that they'll be able to handle like the hospitality, the gifts, concessions, and help work towards making the overall experience for the zoo that much better. It's going to be a person that'll be, hopefully a long-term person that's going to be their job, and they're going to help with, could be anything what they might need. Could be scooters, could be, other things as well. And I think this is a good step. It's a great idea, and that we're going to do this. Now, the curator of education, that's another one, and kind of the same. This person is going to be able to handle the education for the park and the awareness and everything else, and kind of bringing that all together and making that, keeping that as a full-time position and getting the right person experience for that spot as well. And I think this is another good move as well, too. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I would just say that I think this is a great idea to bring them on board and give them a classification like before.
Yeah.
And that way they also get the health insurance, and they're liable to stay longer,
Yeah, absolutely.
become more, permanent.
Absolutely.
Are both of these currently part-time positions?
The, I'm 100% positive the guest services supervisor is part-time, and the curator, I'm not 100% positive. I would be, but I do know that this is gonna move it into a position where we're gonna get the right experience, for that position definitely as a full-time position. But I'm not positive, but I can have that answer for you
No,
before we.
just curious. I
Yeah.
thought I heard you say that's for the guest services. I mean that makes sense. I would assume that would probably open up the pool of potential talent for those positions as well. So.
You're 100% correct. Yeah. All right. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. That's all for Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee. A call for adjournment at 7:02.
Second.
Thank you, Council Tavares. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Call the Finance Committee to order.
Actually, point of order, it'll be Laurie, she has guests.
Oh, excuse me.
So I call Zoning and Land Use Committee to order, and members of the committee are myself, Laura Dolan, and Nick Lavoy. And tonight we have a presenter, Gary Ragian, from City Council.
Good evening, Council President Delicio, Committee Chair Sawyer, members of the Municipal Council. For the record, my name is Gary Arazian. I'm the city's Director of Planning and Development. Thank you for having me tonight. Along with me tonight, I have the Department Senior Land Use Planner, Steffi Davies. And also we have another guest, Sarah Marin, a consultant with the Barrett Planning Group, who will be making a presentation to the council regarding the topic of discussion tonight, which is regarding what I consider a relatively recent amendment to Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3A, which was enacted that requires MBTA communities to have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily zoning is permitted as a matter of right. Could be deemed as an oversimplification, but that's actually what the tenets are. There's a lot more substance to it, but that's essentially the purpose of 48. As you know, Chapter 48 is the Commonwealth's Zoning Act, and every municipality, whether it's a bylaw for a town or a zoning ordinance for a city, all bylaws and ordinances are subsets of the Zoning Act, or they're predicated on the Zoning Act. I appeared before the Municipal Council roughly about a year ago at this time and provided an overview of Section 3A then. We're getting closer to a deadline date that we're going to be speaking with you about tonight, but I thought it was an appropriate time to reappear again tonight to give you another overview or another presentation. Since the last time I appeared before the Municipal Council, I've submitted much documentation to the state as we get closer and closer for the adoption of Section 3A. I'm pretty sure we're compliant with everything that we've needed to submit so far. And we've also hired the Barrett Planning Group. I was successful in getting a grant from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, so it's not costing the city any money. There was no in-kind services, no cash match. It was just an outright grant, so we hired the Barrett Planning Group. The only bit that I'm going to steal from our consultant, some thunder, is the fact that our deadline date, if you may, to adopt the zoning ordinance, which is this year, December 31st, 2024. So we're going to talk about that and kind of work backwards and tell you some of the steps that we're going through. This is going to involve the planning board, the zoning board, of course, the building inspector. I'm going to appear before the council some more as we move forward, but again, just wanted to kind of recalibrate and regroup with you at this point. So without getting into too much more now, I want to introduce Ms. Sarah Moran of the Barry Planning Group, and she's going to provide you with a brief presentation on Section 3A. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Gary. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Really a pleasure to be here. Like Gary said, I'm really here to give you an overview of this MBTA Communities Law, the background of it, what it means for the city, what you're going to be required to do, and a little bit about how compliance works and what the state is looking for in terms of compliance. As Gary said, this is a new section of the Zoning Act, and it applies to all MBTA communities. So the way they define that is any community with any direct MBTA service, commuter rail, the T, and any city that is adjacent to any of those communities. So if you see in this map, it's most of eastern Massachusetts. So all of these cities and towns are trying to figure out how to comply. And there's different requirements based on whether you have a station, whether you're adjacent to a community with a station. But for all of these different communities and classifications, the state has a formula that will determine what they're looking to see for compliance with this law. So the few basic requirements for this, some of this Gary went over, but I'll go over it again anyway because it's important. It should be located near the commuter rail station as much as practical. And I'll go into how they've interpreted that in a little bit, but basically you're required to have at least a portion of your district within half a mile of your station or stations. So that's a location restraint. It has to be at least 50 acres in total size. That's how they've interpreted reasonable size district. The type of housing, the type of multifamily, basically, the idea is to make sure that it's appropriate for, or at least there's no barriers to this housing being appropriate for, families. So in this MBTA Communities District, the city is not allowed to require age restrictions or have any restrictions on the number of bedrooms for these units. The idea being that will, facilitate more family-appropriate units. Which was a priority when drafting this law. And there's also a particular, in addition to the area size of the district, there's also a target unit capacity that the state wants to see. So it's both the physical size of the district as well as an estimate of how many units could be built in that district under the regulations. So they're looking for all of that. And the penalties for noncompliance, there's a long list of grants, state grants that the city would be either ineligible for or would be lowered on the priority for if the city does not comply by the deadline. And there's also potential legal issues that would arise for a non-compliant community. So, this, like Gary said, the compliance deadline for most communities, including Attleboro, is the very end of this year, December 31st. So just a little bit of background on why this is happening. This was really a response to the housing crisis. This is the way, this is the state's way of trying to encourage more housing production across, the Commonwealth. And the reasons for that are not only are people unable to stay in Massachusetts, it affects employment, it affects, the future of growth, it affects, people's quality of life. And the idea behind this law, the sort of supposition it's based on, is that zoning is a barrier. So the idea behind this law is that by requiring communities to change their zoning, the housing will follow based on the market. So that's sort of the approach. You're required to do this zoning because it's perceived as a barrier. and they're trying to remove that barrier to encourage the production of housing. And although the state is mandating that these communities adopt this law, there is, the ability for the municipality to plan, where this is going to be located. You're writing your own regulations. There's not some default set of zoning regulations that you have to adopt. As long as it meets the criteria, there is some local flexibility. And I'll go into some of what that is. So what is the role of the state? Obviously, the legislature adopted this law, but really the main agency that we're dealing with is the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, until recently known as DHCD, but now they're HLC. So they're the ones who developed these compliance guidelines that I'll be explaining to you. They're the ones that are handling all of the applications, determining compliance, and also the state, as Gary said, is also providing technical assistance grants to help the communities comply. So there are some aspects of this law that are, not super intuitive, some misinformation going around. So just to be clear about what exactly this law does and does not require. This law is looking for zoning. They're not going to check to see if every hypothetical unit allowed under that zoning is going to be built. They're checking to see if the zoning is in place to facilitate that. And then, whether it gets built or not, that's up to market. So, when I'm going to go into your requirements for units later, the state's not going to come in and count every unit and say, oh, you're off by 5. They just want to see that you are allowing that many units. Some communities wonder, do we have to do anything to make this multifamily housing more viable? Do we have to improve infrastructure? Do we have to, install new, better sewer lines in this area? The answer is no. Essentially, those are things that the law doesn't really account for. As long as you allow the zoning, you aren't required to go out of your way to change anything else. Your utility capacity is your utility capacity. And also the next bullet point, other laws like the Wetlands Protection Act, Title V, basically anything that's not in your local zoning bylaw, the state's not going to worry too much about because that's less under your control. So all of this is to say is that it's not, cutting through every single regulation. It's really just targeting specifically your local zoning. This one, the wording is a little confusing, but basically this is saying that in determining compliance with the zoning, the state's going to be sort of agnostic as to what is there already. So they're not so the area that you're zoning has to have a certain capacity for units. Say that's 2,000. The state's looking to see a zoning bylaw that allows 2,000 units to be built. They're not looking at how many units are there now. So there could be 500 units there now. There could be 0 units there now. There could be, any number of units there now. They're just looking at what does the zoning allow you to do. So the net increase of what you're zoning for might not necessarily be that full number, if there's already units there. If that's a little unclear, it'll come up a few more times. That's probably one of the more confusing aspects of this. We sort of refer to it as zoned capacity. It's sort of an unintuitive concept, so I'll come back to it. Oh, held down the arrow. But just know that it's not a matter of going on the ground to see what's there and counting up all those units. What's on the ground now is almost sort of irrelevant for the checks they're doing to see for compliance. And of course, the state's position is there is no way to opt out of this. So everyone's got to do it. So to go into a little more detail about what these requirements are. So I mentioned that the reasonable size requirement, that means 50 acres. That's what applies to Attleboro. Your district must be at least 50 total acres. Now, there is some flexibility about where these acres are located. So, for example, this does not have to be one single contiguous 50-acre district. It can be broken up a bit. It could be a single contiguous 50-acre district, but that's not necessarily the case if that doesn't work for the city. So, as long as half of the district is contiguous, so let's say you stick to the 50-acre minimum, that means 25 acres would have to be contiguous. But then the other pieces could be broken up a bit more to fit smaller sites that might be good for encouraging multifamily development. So there does not necessarily need to be a giant 50-acre single chunk of the city that you're zoning for this. There's some flexibility. Although to avoid too much spot zoning and picking out little parcels, they do have to be at least 5 acres. So you can split it up into smaller chunks, but each of those smaller chunks has to be at least 5 acres. So that does still give you quite a bit of flexibility. Now the minimum gross density. So this is basically when you take, it's a little more complicated than this because they have their formulas to calculate it, but essentially that's when you average together this entire 50-acre district, you have to allow at least 15 units per acre of residential density. It can be higher, but the total can't be lower than that. That's the absolute floor they're checking for. And then in addition to the physical size and the density, there's also a specific zoned capacity number that they're also looking for. So all 3 of these boxes need to be checked for a compliant district. So I mentioned earlier that there are requirements about the location of the district in relation to the transit station. So this chart is showing how the guidelines calculate what that requirement is. So it's based on how much land you have in this 1/2 mile radius of the train station. And don't worry about this number too much. The important number is here. Based on how much land area you have near your stations, the formula decrees that half of your district, at least half, must be within that 1/2 mile radius. So conversely, the other half may be elsewhere. So it can be all in that radius, but at least half of it has to be. So going back here, at least half of it must be contiguous. At least half of it must be within the station radius. But other than that, there is some flexibility in the location. Yeah, so getting back to this zoned capacity number, what does that number actually mean? So to calculate this is where the compliance model comes in. There's a Excel spreadsheet that's available on HLC's website. It's the primary tool that they'll use to measure compliance, and the main purpose of that tool is to take the areas that the community has selected, to take the proposed dimensional regulations, and then to run some formulas to estimate, based on these regulations and these specific parcels, touch the mic, how many units do we think this would yield? And that's the number they're looking for. So it's not how many units are there on the ground, it's purely what do we think the zoning can yield given this area. So it's sort of a hypothetical number, but the thought is that they're trying to test the zoning a little to at least make sure we can probably get to this number of units given what you're proposing. And a lot of detail goes into that. I think I have a slide about just some of the regulations that go into there, but that is what they're looking for. And like I said, a zone capacity, as long as you allow it, you don't necessarily have to build them. You're not concerned with existing units. And if some other regulation, like the Wetlands Protection Act, for example, happens to limit that number, as long as it's not from your local zoning, a sort of, for lack of a better term, third-party regulation like that can reduce those numbers, and it's okay. So really, you're not looking at much beyond your zoning. If there's some other source that might impact that number, for the most part, you don't have to worry about that. You just need to look at what's in your local zoning regulations, and if that's okay, some of these other things won't matter. So there are some opportunities to introduce more local review into this. It does have to be allowed by right, meaning there's no discretionary permit. You can't say no, but you can have these multifamily units subject to site plan review, where the city can regulate aspects of site design, like circulation, vehicular access, sort of the scale and massing and exterior materials of buildings, things like screening, buffers, site. There's some local review and control over the site, as long as the city is not using that to deny projects. You can still have some say over what the project looks like. You just have to allow it. Mixed use can be allowed. The way to think about it is the state wants to see this one type of development, multifamily housing that is accessible to families. But if you want to require or even encourage other types of development, as long as that one box is checked, you can do other things. Some communities we've worked with have wanted to offer density bonuses to developers who include commercial space. So even though you can't require it, there are ways you can write your zoning to encourage certain types of development, as long as that key type of multifamily development is allowed. So this slide is a bit about the compliance model that I already mentioned. So this is, without going too much into the technical detail, all of this is to say that there's quite a bit of technical bells and whistles behind the scenes, which the city has us to take care of, so don't worry about that. But you're mapping the specific parcels on GIS, computer mapping systems, importing those into the model. You're putting parking requirements, you're putting lot coverage requirements, you're putting all kinds of requirements, density limits, building height. So they're really trying to do the math on these specific areas, these specific parcels, to try to come to the best possible guess about how viable this area would be as a district. This I won't go into a ton because it's a little more in the weeds than we really need to get, but this is a little bit about how density is calculated, and the point of this is that what they're really measuring is the overall, all 50 acres combined. So each of the individual parcels might have a certain density, and sometimes they can be different, but what they're really looking at is the overall, when you include every parcel, every bit of road, every bit of area, does this all average out to allowing 15 units per acre? So a few Attleboro specific requirements. So the really important ones are, obviously, district size 50 acres, that's the same for most communities. But in those at least 50 acres, it can be larger, you have to demonstrate that you have zoned for 2,865 units. This number is a typo, that should be 50%. Half of it must be within the half-mile station radius. And all of that has to average out to a density of 15 units per acre across your district. So compliance means the zoning must not only be adopted, but there's also a compliance application that must be submitted. So all of that has to be done by the end of this calendar year. And then the state will have 90 days to issue a response, a ruling. And during that 90-day period, it's like a 90-day grace period. Even if they ultimately end up having issues with the zoning, you'll be considered to be in compliance until a decision is rendered. So it's very important to get the application in, even if you think there's problems with it, because it freezes. The state just wants to see you get stuff in, and they will hopefully issue a resounding approval. What's wrong with this? So really the next steps for this process, what we're going to work with, Gary and the rest of the planning department to do is to start identifying potential areas around the city that can meet all of these requirements. Every step of the way, keeping up with the compliance model to make sure that we're staying within the boundaries of what the state wants to see. And just sort of trying to figure out what locations work best from a planning perspective in Attleboro while also satisfying the specific technical requirements that the state has set out. So that's the stage that we're at. We're thinking about where this district can be, and it will probably be in a few different locations. Like I said, it can be spread out a bit. But just trying to figure out where that makes sense. That's the first step here. So that's my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us about this. I do have a question, actually. We have 2 stations in Attleboro, one that's working, one that's not right now, but does that mean we have double the restrictions and then we have to have double this
No.
amount of units?
So that, I'm going to go to a slide without the typo. That 50% station area can be met with any combination of those 2 stations. That, like, say 25 acres, 10 acres could be in one station, 15 could be in the other. Just within any half-mile distance of any station, you have to have half of it. So it could all be in one station, could be split, whatever works best for the city.
Okay. And I'm sorry, one other question is, you mentioned something about checks from the state. What does that include, or what happens with that?
So basically, once there's a compliance application, a final submission that includes all the technical modeling data, the final language of whatever zoning district ends up getting proposed. And so they will, go through, read through the zoning, make sure the numbers work, so they hit all those, the 50 acres, the 15 units per acre, the total number of units. They'll double check all of that math, and then they'll also read through the actual text of the bylaw to make sure there's no issues with it. So that's all I mean by the checks. And there is a compliance application, although I'm not sure yet at the stage in the process if we'll have enough time to do that, given the end of the year is the deadline. And
So the state's going to
decisions will come.
essentially audit what we ultimately adopt. It's an audit. And then we'll write back within 90 days whether or not we hit all those check boxes.
All right, I see.
They will.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Frohoff?
Thank you. Can you tell us where we are with respect to the North Attleboro station? There is, how much acreage is that? There is multi-family units there. Are we far away? Are we close? And what is the zoning, excuse me, and what is the zoning of that area?
So I'm going to answer the second part of that. I haven't, to be quite honest with you. Well, at some point we'll look at our sister communities. I'm concentrating on Attleboro right now, so I can always get back to you on that, Councilor Foa. So it's not going to be an on-the-ground zoning. So we're not going to come to the municipal council and ask you to rezone what might be single residence D or general residence A or central business or any current zoning into this zoning district. We're going to do it by an overlay district.
By what district?
What's called an overlay district.
Okay.
So that the tenets of this zoning ordinance would supersede what's in that area by an overlay,
Yeah.
okay? So it's not going to change the zoning, it's going to be an overlay district that says if you do any work in the zoning district and you want to participate in this, that you could go by that zoning.
May I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
So what you're saying is if there's a properly zoned single-family home right now within this 50-acre or 25 acres near the station right now, what the overlay zoning does is say if and when somebody wants to change that, it has to then comply with the
new
zoning,
Correct. With the overlay district, correct.
with the overlay district.
Correct. So that's like if, to use that example, with an existing overlay district, we have the Water Resource Protection District. That allows a variety of uses in the Bungie River Water Resource Protection District and the Orris Pond Water Resource Protection District. If you want to do work in those two water resource protection districts, there's some additional regulations you have to follow. So we already have examples of overlay districts in the city of Attleboro, and this would be one of those, should we adopt it that way, but at least that's going to be the proposal.
Are you telling us that we're not now in compliance with this new regulation?
Well, it's not that we're not in compliance, we have until the 31st, so,
But our zoning now, or
right.
does not satisfy these regulations.
Well, because we haven't adopted it yet, we haven't prepared it to present to the council, so it's not that we're in violation of anything. We would be after December 31st of 2024, but we're not in violation of anything right now.
I'll let others, if I still have a question, I'll come back.
Councilor Holmes and Cobus, and then Angelos.
Thank you. This is just a lot to digest. So you kind of glazed over it, but adding 3,000 units to the city and then saying, oh, well, it's not going to be, there's no pressure to update any of the sewer systems or any of the infrastructure. I mean, I don't know how those two connect. Adding pressure to the city like this, but then saying, don't worry, you don't have to update any of your infrastructure. We just did a tour of the city and how much the changes have done to the fire department and the needs. So I guess there is some concerns about that. How are other communities dealing with that?
Well,
What does the state expect us to do with that?
so remember, there is not a requirement to develop those units. So we could get 3,000 new units without this overlay district, under the normal course of business. That's the first thing. The second part is, it's not a requirement, Councilor Holmes. They're not saying, by you adopting this, now therefore you have to have a housing production plan that ensures that by a certain date, you have to develop 2,865 units, and if you don't, here's the punitive damage to that. So it's not requiring the production of it.
I didn't follow up, please.
Yes, go
So
ahead.
do you think that the next step is going to be a production plan? Do you think that that's what's coming after this is?
I haven't seen anything in legislation. I mean, the legislature could change anytime, but I'm sure I can understand your concern, but there is nothing on the books right now where there's a bill pending that's not going to say, aha, now that you adopted this, now you have to have a production plan for it. I have not seen anything. And I haven't, and we're very well networked with all the planners, with the legislature, with our own state legislatures. I haven't seen anything on the books right now that's even nothing. So I'm not going to say even remotely close to that, which would suggest, well, there's something. There isn't anything that I'm aware of, Counselor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So once you set up the areas, it's up to homeowners to come forward and say, we're interested in looking into this zoning or not. Whoever owns the land or would be coming forward and.
Whoever. It could be the homeowner. It could be a developer. It could be anybody. So again, it's anyone that wants to file an application. And again, I just want to stress, it is not a requirement that you have to build an additional 2,865 units. And it could be anyone, just like any other permitting application we have now. It could be the homeowner, it could be a representative of the homeowner, it could be a company. We would file the application or process the application as we do any application right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a similar question to Councilor Holmes, and I was looking at exactly that same thing with the potential of 3,000 units. And I saw a lot of talk about, wetlands protection and talk there. But if we set aside, say, an area downtown or whatever, I remember there was just the unit that we were talking about downtown, the tall unit, and there was concern with the
floodway.
What's that?
The floodway?
The floodway or the ladder having trouble with the ladder
Yeah,
truck.
it was the floodplain and that property had both floodplain and floodway, both.
So we had concern there.
That would still
with
apply.
Potential. Okay, and
That would
that's what I was
absolutely
looking for.
apply.
So, like, if all of a sudden this was by right, can you talk to me about
Sure.
like what protection the city
Sure,
would have to be able
absolutely.
to say no because we don't have the infrastructure?
Just like any development now, this is the same thing, just same development now. If you get an approval for a project from, say, a multifamily development, say, let's use that example without calling out the property.
Sure, yeah.
Where there's floodway and floodplain. If the zoning board of appeals were to approve that project, that in no way compels the Conservation Commission to do 3 other permits, at least 3 at the local level, let alone the license, Chapter 91 license you need from the federal government and any permitting from the Army Corps or MEMA. So let's just talk local. So if the Board of Appeals were to have granted the special permit for that project, that in no way obligates, just like this, the Conservation Commission to either bypass their rules and regulations or to compel them to approve. There were at least 3 permits that were pending before the Conservation Commission, for that matter. A notice of intent application, stormwater permit application, and jurisdiction under the Rivers Act.
Oh, but what about if there was concerns about, say the sewer lines wouldn't be able to
Absolutely, sure. Okay, let's talk about that. So let's say...
somewhere else?
Sure. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, that the development received, well, it wouldn't receive a permit until it got a clean bill of health from the wastewater department. Because one of the findings the Board of Appeals has to make under our special permit procedures is whether or not the project would have negative adverse impact on municipal services. Among those are water and sewer. If the water superintendent or the wastewater superintendent was to write a letter to the Board of Appeals saying this development is going to generate X amount of sewerage, it will exceed the capacity of the existing sewer line. We have tried to work with, I'm just go along with that, we have worked for several weeks, several months to come to some agreement that the developer pay for and install an upgrade to the sewer line, but have been unsuccessful. So at this point, Board of Appeals, I submit to you, again, this is coming to the wastewater department, to the board, that we can't support this project because there isn't sufficient sewage capacity. That's grounds for denial.
Okay.
So the adoption of this by right does not in any way compel the city to approve anything that comes under it. Municipal department heads, other agencies, whether it's planning board or Conservation Commission or the zoning board, wherever this falls, it's probably going to fall under the planning board on the major site plan review. So if there's any other reductions they need as part of this development, a reduction in parking, or an earth removal permit, floodplain, an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission, if none of those materialize, the fact that the planning board, based on its site plan review criteria, that it's satisfied, doesn't meet any other of the permitting requirements, the project would be denied.
Perfect. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sawyer. Thank you, Gary. So basically, all we have to do is adopt the ordinance, but we don't have to, if it just doesn't happen and nobody comes forward and says we want to build, we're okay. We just have to adopt it.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to piggyback on Councilor Holmes. So let me first answer your question. Absolutely. We adopt this and no one ever comes to the city of Attleboro utilize lot. Nothing ever happens. Nothing comes bad of it. To fall back on your other question, Councilor, yeah, this is a lot. And please understand, my intent tonight was in no way to sell this, to try to get an understanding of technical applications or anything. I just thought it was about time that I come back again, because we've done some due diligence to get it to this point. But I told the consultant and with my staff, we had this discussion. I think it's about time I got to go back to the council. If you remembered it, fantastic. You probably might have some recurrence of it. Clearly, the other councils that are new most likely would not have known about it. I thought it was a fair time to come before you, explain this again at 50,000 feet. And this is going to be subject to public hearings, public meetings. We're going to do planning charrettes. But ultimately, this is going to come back before the city council for a joint public hearing with the planning board to amend the zoning ordinance.
And my last follow-up on that is there any thoughts of what areas that would qualify or that we'd be able to adopt?
I have, of course. I've speculated between the downtown commuter rail, the one along the Attleboro-Pawtucket line, 35 acres, 15 acres, 25 acres, 555. I've run a few queries, but they're all speculative. They haven't gone through the model that Sarah discussed. It's got to get all vetted out. But to tell you that I haven't done any of that, of course I have. It's just what I do all day. It's just, I have the luxury of, most of the time, to think. And I have. Just think, you pay me to think. And in light of everything else that we're doing with Nick and Stephanie and the staff, whether it's on city time or whenever, I think these through. So absolutely, I've given it considerable thought. But, Council, not to the point, and clearly not for purposes of tonight, to say, hey, guess what? I'm just going to dip my toe in the water. Say, these are the kind of things, because it's not fair, because why? I wouldn't have the backup answers to those. So all that's going to get all vetted out. We'll have all the answers for you, and we will have what I think would be a cogent proposal that meets the standards when that time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, Steph, and Sarah for being here. And also thank you for finding the grant to cover this. I think that's impressive. Couple points I had. One was, where does the 2865 unit figure come from? Because wouldn't that put it at 57 units an acre?
Sure. So I'm going to, more on a technical level, that was a number that was given to us. I did a little work on it, but I think Sarah's a lot more qualified to answer that question.
Yeah, so that number is based off a certain percentage of the units you already have. So do we have the actual number of units? We might not have that in this presentation, but it's proportional to the number of units you have. That's where that 28, 3,000, whatever it is, number comes from. It's a certain percentage of your overall units. So, and you are right that shoving them all into just 50 acres would result in a very high density. That's why we talk about the size of the district, the density of the district, and that number of units sort of separately. They're obviously related, but they're all different levers to pull, and it's, it depends on what each municipality is comfortable with and what their priorities are.
Thank you. And one more thing. Touching on Councilor Holmes' point, and I thought of it as well, is if possible, I think maybe it'd be beneficial to see almost a hypothetical plan on how we could obtain the units in a 5 or so year plan. I know that's a big workload, but I definitely could see a state concern if this is done on the 31st and no city really makes a movement to build anything. It seems like this is just a feel-good legislation if nobody builds anything and the housing crisis just gets worse. So I could see where the state would push to require it in a 5-year timeline or a 10-year timeline. So, I think it may be beneficial just to have a hypothetical plan in place or even just something to look at. I'll conclude my comments.
Councilor Reynolds.
So I have two questions. One is, I think, Gary, you just mentioned it, the South Attleboro-Pawtucket line. There's no train station down there. I don't see it even ever happening, quite frankly. So that wouldn't be in the half-mile limit because there's nothing there. Just says Pawtucket, South Attleboro, but there is no stop there and has not been.
Yeah, but until that's in cement, I don't want to.
It is in cement.
Okay.
That's all is it there, is cement.
Right. Well, yeah,
My
I guess
second
literally.
question- Yeah, literally, it's
And
cement.
steel as well.
And it's going nowhere. I don't
Yeah.
care what anybody says, that's going nowhere. And the other question.
So can I answer that? So if that's the
Sure,
case,
sure,
well,
go
just out of fairness to you, if
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
case where we see it's not happening, then we're going to have that area around the downtown.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I
so-
understand that because we
All
do
right.
have a train station there. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a train station. That
Sure.
makes sense to me.
Okay.
South Attleboro does not have a train station. I know we keep saying that this doesn't have to be built, so I ask, why is it mandated that we have to set aside the 50 acres? If nothing has to happen there, I'm with Nick. It's a feel-good hello,
Yeah.
or then 5 years down the road, it's, hey, you got to do it.
Sure, because there's a stick. And
Yeah,
it's-
there's always a stick.
Well, it's transparent. It's on one of the sheets. Several things happen. We could get fined by the fair housing
I
violations.
understand that.
And the second is that we would either be ineligible, meaning we can't file for,
Mm-hmm.
or even if we do file, they're going to label us, the state, non-competitive.
Right.
Maybe take our grant application to the bottom of the list. I will tell you, a lot of the grant programs that are on that list, that's our bread and butter.
I understand that, Gary.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I
Okay,
understand
so that's the
that.
stick, then.
But what I'm saying is, it's mandated to set aside 50 acres. To say that you're going to set those aside
and then nobody's going to build is almost humorous. I mean, sooner or later, somebody is going to build on those 50 acres, and it is going to affect the sewer system, the water system. It is going to affect everything in Attleboro. So, I mean, I think for us to be hearing this and say, well, it doesn't matter, well, it does matter. And I go along with Diana. Where does that money come from now? So we don't get that money if we don't do it, but who's going to give us the money to do all the other things that are going to happen? I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay,
like
and-
let's have a feel good. Let's all be honest about what might end up happening.
Well,
here.
we're not going through just an exercise for the sake of going
No,
through an exercise either. okay?
obviously not. So.
Hopefully people do, so we get additional housing. But as I said to Councilor Holmes, is that development can happen now without this overlay district. And then we're still right back where we were, where the public works director or the water superintendent or the wastewater superintendent says we need to upgrade sewer lines without this overlay district. So without this overlay district doesn't mean development stops in the city of Attleboro.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
I have a question when you get to
Lot to digest, a
Yeah.
lot. First question I have, and I have several. Can you, Gary, get a deck to Virginia, this deck to Virginia, so we all have it? Thank you. The one thing that scares me, I kind of feel like we're chasing our tail here, right? Well, we've got to adopt this, because if we don't adopt this, we're already not going to get the money that we're counting on, the bread and butter, as you said. But also, I don't know if anyone noticed, this law does not provide an opt-out. That's a little concerning to me. At first, I mean, I remember a lot of this has been in the news a lot, you know, some towns, Milton specifically, I think Rentham at one point said they weren't going to go for it. Rentham seems to be changing their tune a little. I see a lot of the positives here. But Gary, I was glad to hear you say that you're not here trying to sell it to us. The other concern I have, we have 7.5 months to get this done, and there's still so many questions, so many answers we have. What local review do we have other than site plan review? I don't know if, Sarah, you said that, you know, we can't deny a project. Well, so what leeway do we have? What control
Well,
does
I
the
don't
city
think
have?
Sarah said we can't deny a project. I mean,
Maybe I misheard.
anything can be denied, right? Because
Well, that's my question, is what oversight do we still have as a community?
so we have by right uses now. We have for example, you could propose.
Tied to grant money?
Pardon?
Tied to grant money?
No.
I think that's a little bit of the caveat, right?
Okay, but that's a different question. With all due respect, I think that's a different question. The question is what do we have right now as safeguards? And right now, in the city of Attleboro, in the central business zoning.
My question was relating to this.
Okay, so if the governor says, adopt this because we want to generate more housing, but if you don't, I'm not going to say Attleboro, communities that don't do this, you know, you're not going to get either, we're going to repudiate a grant application, say a Master Works grant application, or we're going to give it a checkbox to say, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you didn't get this legislation, it's going to maybe go down to the bottom of the pile. Well, absolutely, we're telling you that right now. But
That in itself is concerning.
okay, but I just want to, and plus there's no opt-out, I get that too, so it doesn't say in 5 years, if nothing happens, you go right back to where you were. But I have a job, we all have a job, we will present this to the council. I'm hopeful, because I want to give the municipal council plenty of time. So trust me when I tell you, this isn't going to come down for request for a joint public hearing at the end of November, so you have a hearing in December.
Sure.
I'm looking probably toward the end of the summer to have this down, so we have 3-4 months to vet this all out.
Yeah.
So please trust me on that.
If I may, Laurie. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Gary, I trust you more
I
than
know you do,
this.
but.
But it's also my
but
job
still,
to
I
ask the
think everyone
questions
needs
that
to hear that, so.
might be a little uncomfortable to answer, right? Or to ask. So this is new, it's an awful lot. How many acres, if you know off the top of your head, and it can be a ballpark, is the lot adjacent to the MBTA parking lot? Down on Judy Robbins Park.
That's owned by the Redevelopment Authority?
Yeah.
I think it's about 8.
So just to put that in perspective, how big 50 acres can be, right? Does that include existing projects? So if we vote this in and then all of a sudden the project down at where Atlantic Golf, for instance, comes through?
Okay, I'm sorry, what's the question?
Projects that haven't started that we know could be on the horizon, if we adopt this in December, they put shovels in the ground in January, something that we know is already on the books, will that meet some of these needs, some of these qualifications? Or does it have to be?
Yeah, sure. It probably depends if it's in the district.
Yeah. Well,
Because remember what we were talking about, what was that term, capacity zoning?
Zone capacity.
So zone capacity. So what that says is let's say, Council President, that one of the zones includes that land mass. Okay? And let's say for the sake of discussion, we're gonna fast forward, and this is late August, we're holding the public hearing. And one of the areas that we've identified is, let's say, I'm just throwing this out right now, okay, please, purely speculative,
Yeah, of
20
course.
acres. And that we said in that zone, it has to be 800 units, okay? So remember, it's not that you have to create, you need to have 800 units in that zoning district. 300 of them are already there, now you have 500. So it's not in addition to, it's a net,
that's good clarification.
okay?
So to that point, again, and if you don't know the
Correct,
answer,
is
I'm
that
kind of
correct?
throwing it at you.
Yep, okay, that's correct.
Wall Street North and South, what's the acreage there? I don't know if you know off the top of your head, it's been some time.
Wall Street, nothing. Oh, Renaissance Station North
Renaissance
and
Station,
1
yeah.
Wall Street.
Yeah. Sorry, I
One
still
Wall Street's
use,
about 63,000 square feet, so that's roughly an acre and a half.
okay.
Renaissance Station, Steph, what do you think, about an acre, a little less than an acre?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, between those two, I want to say ballpark, plus or minus 2.5 acres.
Kind of puts things in perspective how big 50 acres could be. Thank you.
But it's not
Automatic.
136 units on every lot though, too, right? I mean, you're talking an acre and a half, and
Yep,
there's a limitation on the density, so, you can't just extrapolate that and say, wow, no, it's 50 times that amount, because that's not the case.
no, I understand that, I
Okay.
understand that, but again, I think it's,
Because remember, you gotta take into account the number of units in that district already.
yep. Well, that was the other question too, is, how many units are in each, but, I just think, I don't know that it's necessarily feel-good legislation, but I think it's a do this, or, you're gonna lose the grants, like you said, that are our bread and
Council,
butter,
that's why I
so-
made it a point to come here as early as I could.
Yeah.
With the best amount of information I have, without putting it out anymore, saying, I'm ready now to come and knock on the door again and bring you up to speed. I could have waited till May, June, July, and I think that would not have been prudent.
Gary, this
to do
isn't,
that, so.
I don't think any of our questions or comments are
Yeah,
directed
okay,
towards
no.
you. You've proven to be a good partner to us over the years. And Gary, if you're not transparent, you're nothing. And you are about as transparent as they
Thank you,
come,
sir.
my friend, all right? So I just think that it's
fair
important
enough,
that
yeah.
this is such a game change for what the future of Attleboro is gonna hold. We've got to ask these questions, and we wouldn't be doing our residents and our constituents any favors if we didn't. We certainly rely on your judgment and your guidance.
And let me also throw this out too, is when this legislation first came out, and Karen, I'm sorry, Sarah, if you want to offer any insight, what we had before you was actually changed from when it was first originally rolled out. And why? From a lot of communities push, especially small ones, especially smaller towns, push back a lot. First it was 50 acres, then it was, okay, you could split it in half. Now they allow mixed use. There were other optics, again, that I guess if you give me a few seconds, I can think of, but it's changed.
Oh, especially
So it's-
because like Cape Ann, you had Rockland, you have Gloucester, you have a lot of these communities that were just like, wait a second.
Wait a second.
What's this gonna do to our look and feel? And I
Sure.
think that that's a question that we need to ask too, is what's this going, Council Sawyer, I'm sorry, I'm kind of speaking out of turn, but I just think that these are important things that we need to really look at and say,
doubt.
is this right for Attleboro?
No doubt, no doubt.
So, thank you as always. Of
course.
Thank you, Council
Dr.
Sawyer.
Waterman and Tamara's.
So this could be a question for both of you, or either. This proposed housing that is eventually going to occur, should everything go forward, does it allow for lower income or senior housing?
It doesn't require it.
No, I'm not asking requiring, but allowing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, that is a good point. The city may require up to 10% of the units be, deed restricted affordable. Just blanket, yes, all communities can have up to 10%. Then if you want to go above that, you have to demonstrate with an economic feasibility study, that would not limit development potential by requiring more than 10%. But 10% you can just require, no questions asked.
And thank you, Councilor Waterman. That was actually one of my questions, was there any minimum affordable housing component to this requirement? But, so that's good to hear.
In fact, there is a maximum.
Gotcha. And I have a few questions. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
All right. So for a non-contiguous 3A district, is there a requirement? I know you said there's a requirement on how much has to be within the half mile of the MBTA station. I think you said 50%, right? Is there sort of an equivalent requirement for how far any non-contiguous part can be from an MBT ramp?
That is a good question, but no, there is no such limitation.
Okay.
And the minimum size is 5 acres.
And then to piggyback on what something Councilor Reynolds mentioned earlier, obviously we've got the South Attleboro station. It's not operational now, but can we use the South Attleboro station for purposes of establishing this district based on the premise that it's rebuilt? And if it's not, does that become an issue down the road if we comply with this legislation, say by the end of the year, by proposing this district, and let's say in a year from now or year and a half, whatever, it's determined, yeah, this station's probably
Not going to happen, sure. So, as I said earlier, I did run some queries including it, but absolutely, that's an excellent question. Going to get it answered, and if it cannot be, then we won't include it. So hopefully then, by that, then we won't have that issue down the line. So we'll know that the time we do the decision, at the time of the public hearing, Councilor Tavares.
And I just asked because I'm sure that makes a huge difference
Yeah.
in probably what your proposal looks like
Yeah.
from a planning perspective.
Absolutely will, yeah.
What we can utilize and what
Sure.
we can in the city. So,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. And then last question, I don't know if you can speak to it or not. Other councilors have asked similar questions, but it's more a perspective thing. How are cities and towns dealing with this now? I mean, obviously Milton was mentioned earlier. I mean, there's the Newtons and other towns that have mentioned, hey, look, state, you keep your infrastructure dollars, we'll figure things out. Have you seen any common themes as far as reactions? I mean, obviously, I've been hearing about this, a lot over the last couple of years, just being in real estate in general. But just curious.
So I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm going to ask Sarah to give you an answer. My answer is, I've got my hands full with the city of Attleboro. And while I try to keep my eye on our sister communities and what's going on in other parts of the Commonwealth, especially if important legislation is coming up with my colleagues on Mass Listserv, see what's going on, you always hear a lot of chatter. Council, I got to tell you, my eyes are 100% on Attleboro, so I really don't know. I can't give you an intelligent answer. Are there issues out there? Absolutely. As I said earlier, the form of this legislation now is much different than it first came out. Why? Because there was a lot of issues. Statistically, like of the 177 commuter rail, like Attleboro, it was 50%, 50%, 30%. That I don't know, but maybe Sarah can offer some light on that.
So, I think, from what I've seen, we've worked with, at this point, gosh, like at least a dozen different communities on MBTA communities compliance. We obviously, monitor it very closely as planners working on this issue. It seems to me that the vast majority probably will comply, or at least attempt to comply. The ones who've opted not to are very high profile, but there's, just within the past couple weeks, there's multiple, at this point, it's town meeting season, there's multiple news items a week of, Plymouth voted, Abington voted, Harvard voted, so they're trickling in. So I think most communities are making an honest effort at it. I can't say that anyone we've worked with has been enthusiastically embracing it. But, they've recognized that, this is the law and we have to comply with it. So I think, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the communities that, are sort of trying to go their own way. But, in the meantime, as planning professionals, we have to, help the communities where we're working with comply with the law. So.
Well, thank you for indulging me.
Councilor Holmes, go ahead.
Sorry. So those communities that you mentioned that have been adopting it, are they at the 50% or the higher? Or are they, do you know?
It's a mix of communities. Some of them, like for example, adjacent communities that don't have a station within their boundaries, they don't have the sort of requirement to have their district in any particular place. That only applies to communities with actual stations. So all the communities that border cities and towns with stations are also subject to this. So they don't really have to pay attention to this chart at all. They're all up here. But it's a wide swath of communities. Some are smaller towns. Obviously, all the rapid transit communities had to comply by the end of last year. Those are all in process. We worked with the city of Chelsea. Like, they're all very different. Like, each of these towns and cities, they're taking very individualized approaches to this. At least the ones we're working with, it's a very specific puzzle, and each municipality is going to fit it a different way. Some have had an existing zoning district they really like and they wanted to tweak a little bit. Some had absolutely nothing to work with and needed to build something from scratch. Some are like, all right, let's put it all in the downtown. Some are like, let's carefully pick and choose some areas to spread it out. It really depends on what the local priorities are. But yeah, we are starting to see we're starting to have a bit more information as actual applications go in. For a very long time, we didn't have that. So as the year goes on, we'll probably learn a bit more about, what approaches are doing really well, what aren't, but they're all very different.
Councilor Falk.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand overlay zoning. Is that, in essence, supposed to be a carrot so that if a developer wants to develop multifamily housing and right now, couldn't because of the zoning of a particular area?
Sure.
Then if you have zoning within the overlay district, he wouldn't have to apply for a zoning variance or change of any sort. Is that a part of it?
So there are all different types of overlay districts. It depends what you want to happen in that overlay district.
Well, here we want multifamily housing to.
Right. And I guess the carrot would be, if one wants to develop at least 15 dwelling units per acre by right, that would be a carrot. But we're not necessarily proposing this as a carrot. I'm proposing this as an overlay for a variety of reasons. One of the things that I might do also is, if it's okay with the council, then maybe I can come back at another point and talk about what an overlay zoning district is as a prerequisite. Not just necessarily to this, just on what a overlay district is. Yeah, we already have one, which is the WRPD. So you mentioned the word carrot. It probably is. I'm not viewing it that way, that it's a carrot or a stick. It's legislation. We're asked to implement it. As planners, as Sarah said, it's our job to do that, bring it before the council. So ultimately, it's going to be in your wisdom whether or not to adopt that, Councilor Foa. I just want to make sure, if I didn't answer your question, let me ask this, if I didn't answer your question, as always, if it's something that Council President Delicia wants, if you want to give it to Virginia, give it a little time to think in, and I'd be happy to reply to it. So I'm sorry if I'm not hitting you on with what you're asking for, and I'm sorry if I'm not grasping the essence of your question. I'm really trying.
I understand.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, both of you, for coming and giving us this information.
Absolutely, and I want to thank the council for allowing us to come. There's a lot here. I totally get it. I know you're going to have hundreds of questions coming down the line, so this is just the tip of the iceberg. So all I ask is your patience, and we'll educate you to the best of our ability. It's my hope that we're going to have a cogent proposal when it's submitted, and we'll work with you. And that's all I could ask for you. So thank you very much for having us and for your questions. And I'm saying sincerely, those are all excellent questions. Really, they were excellent questions, folks. So thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
Gary.
folks. Good night.
Gary, thanks, Sarah.
Yep. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And that actually concludes the business for the Zoning and Land Use Committee, and I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We're adjourned at 8:03.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order at 8:03. All right, everybody is myself, Council Reynolds, and Council Tavares. First item from the docket of April 6th, 2024 I entertain a motion to hold a special meeting on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, for the presentation of the fiscal year 25 proposed general funds budget and the fiscal year 25 proposed budget for the water and wastewater enterprise funds.
Second.
Motion is in order. This is for the budget. And one thing that I'd like to pass around, if you can pass these around. So what I'm passing around now is a tentative schedule for the budget hearings. I met with Mason, the budget director, yesterday, and we came up with a tentative schedule for the budget hearings. These are all subject to change, but I wanted to. So this is different than the measure before us. But while we're talking about this, I also wanted to distribute a general schedule so that you guys could save these dates. And this is what we're roughly thinking about for the budget hearings. So the 3 dates would be Monday, April 30th at 7 p.m. And on that date, that's excuse me, I should say Tuesday, April 30th. I'm sorry, screwed up already. But that's the 5th Tuesday. So we normally wouldn't have a committee meeting that night. So on that night, the idea that's the week after we received the budget, and so the idea is that we would kind of focus on some of the budgets that would hopefully be a little bit more straightforward, like the accounting, the assessor, the building inspector, some of those more straightforward budgets. And then the following 2 weeks, we would meet on Thursday nights. And then group together some of the city finance pieces, and then education, parks and zoos on that following Thursday. And then the following Thursday, we would discuss public safety and the health department, and then public works, water and wastewater, and kind of group them together in that way. So this is all still very tentative, working with Mason to check availability with all the department heads, so it's all subject to change, but that's roughly what we're thinking, and I wanted to give everyone a heads up so that they can mark their calendars now, and as soon as I confirm with all the department heads, I'll send out a confirmation by email to everybody, through Virginia, of course. Any questions regarding that? President Delicio?
No questions. I think this is great from a planning perspective, and, especially where we have the 45 days from when the budget's submitted. So appreciate the forward thinking and the planning.
Mm-hmm. All right. Councilor Fuller?
Is Thursday sacrosanct? And had you considered Friday? Had you considered a different day?
Friday. I think Fridays would be difficult for department heads in general. Thursday. Councilor Angela?
Well, I don't know if you need to finish that. Sorry, I was just getting ready.
I think Fridays would be I think Fridays would be challenging for department heads. I can't do Wednesdays.
Okay. That leaves Monday.
That does leave Monday. Councilor Angela?
Just another thing, consideration of maybe like an earlier start too as well, if that's even possible at all.
Mm-hmm. No. I get off the train at 6:30.
Oh, okay.
I looked at my calendar, I wanted to make a note, is that both of those 2 Thursday nights are Attleboro High School award nights and scholarship night for those who are have seniors in the school. I know that they might not be able to make at least one of those, but just saying that that's what that point is.
Nobody likes your schedule, Todd.
President Delicio?
So what's important to note is these are not mandatory meetings. They will be videotaped. You'll be able to watch them on YouTube. We are up against the time limit, and I certainly appreciate, and I think Fridays, and, it's hard to, we got to keep in mind that the department heads, a lot of them start at 7 a.m. So these are long days for them too. They're long days for us, but this is what we signed up for, especially with budget season. And Todd, I got to tell you, I think that the way you have this planned out, it's important that at least your committee is there, and if not your committee, at least one member of your committee and a third, which could be myself or the vice president.
Councilor Tavares?
Yeah, I didn't have a comment, but I will make every effort to make these dates work. I don't see any reason why they don't work for me, so.
What's that? I won't be here on the 30th or the 9th. I'm out of the country those 2 days, which have been on the calendar for almost 6 months, maybe longer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll be able to make all of them, but I just wanted to thank you for putting this in paper and being able to kind of get a preparation of who will be seeing each night for departments.
Sounds good.
Makes all the difference right there, so thank you.
Okay, so based on that, Councilor Reynolds, I'll try to make sure that, I'll double check that we have at least a second committee person. Councilor Dolan?
I can be here for all of them.
Okay, all right. So we'll press forward with this schedule then. Thank you.
My comment was just gonna be, I'm pretty much very flexible over those next several weeks, so if you need to change the dates, that's fine too. So,
Got it.
but I'm good with the original dates.
Okay, so we'll press forward with the dates and the times. The departments may change based on their availability, but let's move forward with these dates. President Delicio?
Have you reviewed this with the city auditor?
I only with Mason, the
Okay.
budget chair.
Yeah, you may want to make sure that Deb can come down and be a part of it.
Okay.
The last thing I'll say is chairing that committee for 4 years. This is the hardest piece of the job, is just scheduling this, because you're, 20, 30-something department heads, 11 counselors. It's not easy, so
That's where
really
I want
well
to start
done.
now. Sorry.
Yeah, just really well done.
Okay, so, but the motion that's on the floor is to hold the special meeting on Tuesday, April 23rd. Any comments on that? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item. From the docket of April 16th, 2024, I entertain a motion that the vote number 14 of February 21st, 2023 of the Municipal Council be amended by striking the figure $2,500,000 and replacing it with the figure $1,300,000, and secondly, that $1,225,000 in ARPA funds be authorized for the following: wastewater capital, $60,000; wastewater vehicle, $105,000; wastewater camera, $200,000; water capital, $144,000; water vehicle, $716,000.
Second.
Motion's in order. This one was a little bit confusing, as well as one of the other ARPA ones that we had talked about. This one is reallocating some money from the Pawtucket interchange project. Of course, my machine locked out here. So this project was originally bid or projected to be 3.9 million. We budgeted for it at 4.3 million, and so that was the total budget for this. And some of that was ARPA, some of that we bonded for. The bid for that came in at 2.937 million. So the bid came in at less, a little bit less. And so the leftover money from that is roughly, and we're hearing back from the contractor that there was a little bit of overage from the bonding. It was 70,000, and the total they said all they need is 80,000 more, but it was way under what we had originally expected. So we're able to reallocate $1.3 million of those ARPA funds to these additional projects. And I had a number of questions for Mason when we were first talking about that. The first question was, how did we screw up in estimating this initially, and like how did we estimate it at 1.3 million over and allocate that so much over? And so the first time this went out to bid in 2019, we didn't hear back from anybody. Nobody bid on the project. The second time it went out to bid in 2022, we received back one bid for it for 4.3 million. And then the third time, when we allocated the money for it, we allocated it for 4.3 million. We received 3 or 4 bids. I think it was 3 or 4 bids for it. One of them being for 3.9 million, and then the cost of the project ended up coming in way under budget. So it just worked out in our favor. So it's just the way it worked out. But then the thing I asked Mason about after that was, well, if we're bonding for some of this and then the rest is coming from ARPA money, why can't we just bond for less and use that ARPA money so that we don't have to borrow for as much money? And then ultimately reduce our wastewater rate. And that would be a violation of the ARPA the rules of the ARPA funds. We can't use those ARPA funds to pay down money that's already been bonded for. So we can't just take that money and then pay down something that we've already bonded for, which would have been great, but we can't do that, unfortunately. So the items that are on the list here, that this is 1.3 million is being reallocated for, are all items from the capital improvement list. And it's, clean process drain lines, switchgear evaluations, wastewater vehicles, the IBAC camera system that we had talked about, the new heaters in the water shop, the SCADA assessment, all of these. You're talking to Mason, he just went through the capital improvement project and check for water and wastewater, and pulled off those P0, P1, the urgent and P1 items. And by doing that, we're not reducing the rate increase for this year, but remember we had we talked about the rate increase over the next couple of years. He was talking about by doing this and making this change, it will potentially reduce the percentage by a point or two over the next couple of years, because we're removing some of these capital improvement projects. And especially in I had a concern about all the water vehicles that we were purchasing, the $716,000 worth of water vehicles for next year. But with all of these purchases, we won't have to buy any water vehicles for the water department next year at all, potentially, with the exception of there's one electrical vehicle that he thinks he'll be able to he thinks he'll be able to get with electric grant money or something like that. So I think this is an incredibly smart use of these ARPA funds. But the thing to remember is this is the last year these funds are coming in. And everything has to be contracted by the end of the year. But this is the last year that these funds will be available to us. Counselor?
There's nothing stating that all these funds have to go to the water department, correct? In terms of like the restrictions on the money coming back.
I don't think so. They were originally allocated for water and wastewater projects. President Delicio?
Thank you. So the short answer is no, Nick. But I think when looking at what you can and can't use it for the projects that we need, there's an opportunity here to use opera funds, as Councilor Kobus says, that we won't have access to as of the end of this year. These are big ticket items, and the fact that we're able to go through and tick them off the capital improvements, these are things that have been on there for some time. Is that to say that there aren't other projects out there? Certainly there are. But I think this is a very cogent use and prudent use of these funds, just given the situation of what we know is coming down the line in both water and wastewater.
If I can follow up. Yeah, I was just, because you had said priority 0 and priority 1, but the first item I looked at was the camera system. That's a priority 2 on the list here, and I haven't really looked at the other ones, and then $204,000 in capital. So I'm not saying to save these, but I just think that there's other departments that might want their main priorities taken care of as well. So it just seems very department heavy.
They have to be things that are covered by ARPA, that are available for to spend ARPA funds on. Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. So yes, they need to be ARPA approved for what we spend it on, and we all know that we have a million other projects and needs in the city, but I know some of the newer councilors, weren't here last term when we talked about how desperate the enterprise fund is. And so if this can mitigate any rate increases or additional rate increases, then I think it's absolutely a good use of this money. Thank you.
Councilor Tavares?
So just a question that I'm sort of looking to some of the more veteran counselors to maybe weigh in on is, to your point, Councilor Dolan, is it a wiser use, just thinking strategically, to use funds like this for enterprise-related expenses or capital improvements, as opposed to things that would not fit in that category for the very reason that you mentioned, is that helps to sort of mitigate those rate increases over time? Is this something that historically has come up, or is this sort of like a unicorn? That makes sense. This sort of situation here. I know we're dealing
This
with
is sort of a unicorn. But so your question is, does it make sense for us to spend these funds on enterprise-related issues, or should we try to find citywide capital projects that would also meet the ARPA?
Yeah, just generally speaking, and I know, of course, like you can throw a dart and probably hit, a lot of high priority, projects citywide that might be eligible.
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for if there would be ARPA projects that would meet the criteria. President Delicio.
Thank you. So all good questions, and as historically, we've never had a situation like this, because remember, ARPA is all born out of the pandemic. What I will say is this has been vetted by the city auditor, the treasurer, the mayor, the previous budget administrator, the current budget and administration, and Mason. There are two pots of money. You had the federal ARPA funds, then you had Bristol County ARPA funds. Each had their own stipulations on when and how much needed to be spent. Believe me, this went through all the department heads, and our financial team looked at this with a fine-tooth comb. What makes sense? Where can we have the most impact? Where can we use these funds? And I will just caution that we can question all we want, but it's an administrative function that we're up against the clock right now is what it is. So we're in a situation, to Councilor Kovas's point, the Pawtucket Interchange project came in, and this is a great thing that it came in under what it was estimated for. We have the opportunity to take care of some critical projects that we don't have to bond for, that we're not paying cash out of our pocket, but these projects are going to have a huge impact for our enterprise fund, which is going to protect for however long it is, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it's going to protect the ratepayer. And I think that really kudos to the financial team and the mayor for this, sending this down in the way it is.
Any other questions there? And that is a great question, and my immediate thought was, after hearing about the rate increases that we were facing, anything over the next 5 years, anything to sort of mitigate that, I was immediately looking at as a great thing. But I like thinking outside the box and looking at sort of looking at it differently. So I definitely appreciate that, as opposed to I was immediately focused on like those next 5 years of rate increases, and this is something that will help mitigate that. I'll definitely bring that up. I will bring that up with the budget director when I meet with them, and have a conversation about that before the full council meeting next week. That is a great question. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the following relative to the administration's program year 2024 through 2028 5-year consolidated plan, CDBG program year 2024 annual action plan, authorization to submit said program year 2024-2028 5-year consolidated plan and CDBG program year 2024 annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development on or before May 15th, 2024.
Second.
Motion's in order. We had the public hearing. I think it's pretty straightforward. We do this every year. Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. And then I'm going to read this in. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3C, and vote to establish a City of Attleboro strike that. From the docket of March 5th, 2024, I entertain a motion to accept the city's capital improvement program for fiscal year 2025 through 2029.
Second.
Motion's in order. If we can pass this around, and we'll just talk about this for a minute, and then if you can rescind the second after we talk about it. So this is a draft of the capital improvement message, and I'd like to vote this out on the 23rd. But I'd like to gather any, we had talked about hearing from everybody, and there's a highlighted item there where I can put in a table that lists our priorities and items that we believe are the most important capital improvement projects. And I'd like to open it up to everybody, not just the committee, but we'll open it up to the committee first, to hear what items you believe are the top priority capital improvement projects. Counselor Reynolds?
All right, I'll go first. So I had 4.
Okay.
The Riverwalk Parks and Forestry, in Parks and Forestry, floodwater mitigation in planning and development, the streets resurface at
The
DPW.
Riverwalk Park, what was the second one?
Flood water mitigation. That's it, planning and development.
Okay.
Street resurface, DPW. They were all ones, and the police department had 6 ones. Any one of their ones would have been fine. Those are my 4.
Okay. Got it.
All right, I'll go. So I thought that the water department, the Lindley Street water main, and the upgrade for the PFAS, removing that is very important. I also think that that replacing a ladder truck for the fire department is important for fire safety.
I also had the ladder truck, very much so, yeah.
I also think that it is important for Council on Aging, for the senior center is an important thing. That's number 3 for me. And then the health department, again, for health and safety. I didn't pick a specific one, but one of the important or urgent items on the health department would be my number 4.
Okay. The health department, what for the health department?
Well, I just one of the urgent items on the health department list. I didn't particularly pick one. I just thought it because it had some capital improvement items on there that for the health of our city.
Okay. Counselor Waterman and Counselor LeBoy.
Well, I'm just going to say 2. The PFAS plant, number 1, and the Council on Aging building, number 2.
Excellent. Counselor LeBoy?
I had a top 10, but I'll give you my 5 for the sake of your writing and wrist and everything like that. My first is the joint and or separate public safety complex or buildings. My second would be the senior center. My third is a new ladder truck. The fourth is the fire dispatch equipment in South Attleboro. And my fifth was the Parks and Rec garage or facility.
Perfect. Counselor Dolan?
I kind of have a lot, but the fire departments, all their issues at Twin Village, Briggs, and the ladder truck. Park and Forestry, the maintenance building, and the Balfour Riverwalk. So I tried to pick some low-hanging fruit that could be affordable to get done, like the Riverwalk. That's really in rough shape. Police active shooter gear.
The what?
Police active shooter gear.
Okay.
The zoo fire alarm compliance. Veterans SUV. Just 2 more. The library carpet. And I've kind of tried to champion this over the years, but we haven't done anything with it. The recreation ADA compliance, which for the past 5 years has been $600,000 and now is $750,000. And that's all.
Got it. Counselor Holmes?
Well, to Councilor Dolan's point, I do think maybe it would be helpful to, when you write the bullet points, maybe list them, because I'm hearing some buildings, but we're waiting for a feasibility study to come back for the joint complex for safety. We don't even have that back yet, so I don't even know what that's gonna look like. I don't really think that that's something that we can just say, yeah, that's our top priority, because we don't know, we're probably gonna have to get community a lot more involved in that, but there's some others that are maybe more reasonable or that we could potentially have an influence in, so maybe listing them that way.
And that brings up a good point. And so one of the paragraphs that are in the comments there, the next to last paragraph, it says, whereas recognizing the diminishing availability of American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds and the constraints of Proposition 2.5, the city faces upcoming challenges in funding capital improvement projects. Proactive planning and innovative financing methods, such as considering debt exclusions for larger projects, become imperative to sustain and enhance our city's infrastructure and services. I don't know that we have the ability to fund any of these big capital improvement projects like the Council on Aging, a new police station, fire station, a public safety building, any of these big projects without looking at creative means for funding, with our operating costs increasing, with our education costs being so high. So I thought it was useful to put something there. I'm not saying that this is the way we have to go, but I think it's important that we put some sort of language in here, and I'm open to suggestions for how that should be worded. But I think it's important that we have something that says, like, our operating costs are squeezing out our debt spend, our ability to fund these capital improvement projects. ARPA's drying up, and we need to be able to fund the Council on Aging building. We need to be able to fund the new public safety building. We need to. These are things that are incredibly important to the city and the welfare of the residents, but like there's no real capacity to be able to do that. President DeLisio?
Yeah, Todd, thank you. And I really appreciate that second to last paragraph because it's crucial. You know, the other thing is state revenues are down. That's going to impact our budget. That's, you know, a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, I used the analogy of being a kid in the 80s and right before Christmas would get the service merchandise or the Sears catalogs, and you'd go through them and you'd be like, I want this for Christmas, I want this for Christmas, I want this for Christmas. Santa could only bring what Santa can afford. That's where we're at. Because we can't afford everything right now. I think as a city, we need to be able to go through and realize that what might be a priority 2 right now, 2 months could be a priority 1, could be a priority 0. There's a lot of things that we need to plan for. And I think that when you look at the way you put this, the diminishing availability of the ARPA funds is amazing. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling right now because of cost of living being what it is. And a lot of these are going to have to look at some creative financing, such as a potential debt exclusion. I don't know the backs of the taxpayer can handle that right now.
I agree.
So we need to also keep in mind that we can suggest what we'd like, but as a body, we can't tell the administration what to spend the funds on. We can approve it, we can deny it. That's really what it comes down to. I think it's important to have a unified message saying, hey, based on where we are, based on where we want to go as a city, these are the things that keep us up at night. These are the things that keep our residents up at night. But I think that, you know, if we could, in a perfect world, we have the magic wand and we bang out all these. And I think that Council Holmes brings up a great point about the buildings. And, you know, we're trying to rehab buildings and do what we can, but we're an aging city with an aging infrastructure, and these are some real challenges that we have to face.
So we can talk about the wording of this resolution more. I have the notes for the wish list for capital improvement projects that I'll update here. I'll add those to this resolution, and then I'll distribute that through Virginia to the full council. And then on the 23rd, when we meet again, we can make amendments to this but I wanted to make sure to at least socialize that with everybody so that everyone was aware, at least what I was thinking, and sort of understand where my head was, but this is a resolution from the finance committee but ultimately something that we should agree on as a council. So, Councilor Holmes.
Thank you. Just briefly, I agree with the flood mitigation with the Councilor Reynolds. I just wanted to add that as well. And then I think that we should really encourage the administration to hold off on feasibility studies unless there's a plan in place for what the next step would be, because I feel like we've done for the senior center, now for the joint complex, we're spending a lot of money on these feasibility studies without knowing, well, what, what would the next part be? And some of these studies cost $200,000.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the rest of the council agrees with that or not, but I'm hoping that we can just be mindful about how we're spending funds.
President Delacio, then Councilor Paul.
If I could just add to Council Holmes' point, I think in that, whereas recognizing that second to last paragraph, when you're talking about innovative financing methods, I think we need to call out grants, and we need to call out the ability to find grants that'll pay for a lot of this. Maybe the flood mitigation, we had grants to pay for the, I worked with Senator Feeney on the gear extractor. I worked with him on the feasibility study for the senior center, which he was able to get the financing. So I think we need to work and really, when appropriate, hold our state delegation to the fire, and they do a great job.
Councilor Paul.
I wanted to add some priorities.
Excuse me, sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. I think there's just nothing more important for a city than to provide safe, healthy water and wastewater processing. So the PFAS facility seems to me absolutely critical. I also think that we have to start planning somehow or another for a new wastewater facility. We can't just not face the fact that we are using one now that beyond its capacity, beyond its natural life, and in 5 years we're going to be facing $150 million. We've got to start planning for that expense before then. I think we were told the fire department on Union Street has seeping walls. It's not building a whole new fire facility, but we need to at least point those bricks so the firemen are not living with seeping walls. The Newell shelter falls into Councilor Dolan's low-hanging fruit. It's not that expensive, and I think it will bring value to the park. I think the fire alarm for the zoo is critical. We saw leaking roofs in schools. We have to fix those. Maybe it doesn't need a whole roof. Maybe it just needs half a roof where those two parts of the schools meet. I don't know. The ladder truck that people have already mentioned, and of course the Council on Aging. Those are more than 5, but I feel strongly particularly about water, wastewater, and fire. We've got to protect people. If nothing else, we have to do that.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none. Councilor Reynolds, if you don't mind, could you rescind your second?
I do rescind my second.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the business for the Finance Committee. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 8:42.
The IT and Infrastructure Committee meeting is canceled.
I'd like to call to order the Licensing Committee at 8:43. Beside me on this committee is Councilor Waterman and Councilor Holmes. I just have one matter to bring before us tonight. From the docket of April 16, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve an automatic amusement device renewal from Spooky Games located at 9 North Main Street for one video game.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Waterman. Fairly straightforward. I'm sure it was before you when you chair the committee
Very
last year and the
straightforward.
year prior. Great little business here in downtown. Happy to support them by allowing them to renew this. And when I was there, everything was in order. The machine's still there, and thankful they wish to renew the license. Any other comments?
Just, this is a delightful new business that started within the last 2 years. I'm glad to hear that they're still rolling along.
Absolutely agree, especially, we love our small business and happy they're here. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0. And with that, I would call for an adjournment at 8:44.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call the City Property and Claims Committee to order at 8:44. On the docket of April 16th, 2024, I entertain a motion to declare the following fire department equipment as surplus and available for disposition. A 1998 Pierce fire engine, the VIN number is 4P1CT02M8WA000178. The mileage is 117,000. A 2001 Ford F-350 pickup truck, VIN number 1FTSF31S41ED49594, and the mileage is 123,000. And a 2003 Ford Crown Vic, the VIN number is 2FAFP71W93X137547, and the mileage is 122,000.
Second.
Thank you. Pretty self-explanatory. You know, these, even though it might not seem like a lot of mileage, it's a lot of wear and tear on the roads and the speed that they have to go and whatnot. So they die out sooner than our own vehicles most often. Any other comments or concerns?
I actually have a question, actually. Can any of these vehicles that need to be dispositioned go to the high school for their automotive program, or is it not?
I think the high school is on that listing where they are, and they are, correct me, all right, they're on the listing where they go up for disposition, and anyone within the city can say, yes, we want them. And then they get the first gift on them. I mean, they just get them. And then they go to the part where they get sold up on a statewide site.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
Any other questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. On the docket of April 16th, 2024, I entertain a motion to accept a donation of $2,500 in Stop and Shop gift cards from the Attleboro Elks Lodge, number 1014, to the City Veterans Office.
Second.
Again, a great donation and very,
Bless you.
bless you. And very thankful that the Elks Lodge continues to do this type of thing every year. Every time you turn around, Christmas, holidays, whatever, they're always there. Any other concerns, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes, and that is all the City Property and Claims Committee has this evening. I'd like to call for an adjournment.
Oh, second.
Thank you, thank you. And so the City Property and Claims Committee will adjourn at 8:47. Thank you. We need a higher crowd.
I would like to call Public Works Committee to order at 8:47. I have two motions this evening. From the docket of April 16, 2024, I entertain a motion to transfer $182,892 from account 11241000578380 Citywide Reserve Fund for Capital to account 11241000599300 Citywide Transfer to Capital Fund, and to further transfer $182,892 to Fund 3518499600 City Hall Facility Complex transfer from the general fund for funds to purchase a 150-watt diesel generator for the City Hall complex.
Second.
Thank you. So it's, I know it seems odd that we're just buying a generator now, but when the power goes out in City Hall, everybody has to go home. Everything's shut down completely, not functioning. And also, we are on the same electrical grid as the police station next door. So they do have a generator, and from my understanding, it's very old and not doing well. So this generator will facilitate City Hall and the police station. And And so it's a self-contained above-ground unit. I did have an email that I did respond to that someone asked about a natural gas line. The gas line that we have would not meet the capacity that was needed for this generator, and the expense would be astronomical. And considering that we only use this a few times a year, although it's important, it's used very infrequently. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Are you saying this generator is going to function for both the police department next door and for City Hall?
Correct.
Great.
Anybody else have any
Bargain.
questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. And the next one, you'll all get the opportunity to show your support for the new shelter. From the docket of April 16th, 2024, I entertain a motion to transfer $85,280 from account 11241-000-578-380 Citywide Reserve Fund for Capital to account 16501-000-584-029 Park Outdoor Facility Improvements for the repair and painting of the new shelter at Capron Park.
Second.
Thank you. So, for those of us that went on the tour, we got a little dissertation of, what's going on with the new shelter and such. So, the reason, and you know what, the balance, did I not, I'm sorry. I can tell you, it was, the full amount was $100,000, but $15,000 is coming from,
I believe there's a civic committee.
yes, it's coming from, I'm sorry,
Friends of the
with a
Park.
10% contingency, the whole project is $115,280. So only $85,280 is coming from the city. So the reason the high cost is because it's all lead paint and it needs to be contained, and not only is it's lead paint that's in a park, so, and also, the new shelter is a big deal in the city. We rent it constantly. People want to use it all the time. We do the concerts in the park and birthday parties and everything. So I think this is a worthwhile cause. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And that's all the business for the Public Works Committee. I'd like to call for an adjournment at 8:51.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee to order at 8:51. Myself, Councilor LaVoy, and Councilor Angelo. I have two motions this evening. For the docket of April 16, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve expending of such funds and any future grant amendments regarding the receipt of an emergency management performance grant from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency in the amount of $20,150.
Second.
Thank you. I don't know if everybody received the backup information on this, but there was a match that the city had to, we did have to match this money, but we were able, there was some flexibility with that, so we were using it for, to update a computer dispatch system. And basically, this is just to accept the grant. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. From the docket of April 16th, 2024, I entertain a motion to transfer $24,000 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account Fire Dispatch Overtime to complete fiscal year 24.
Second.
Thank you. This.
Did you say
Yeah, I think it was
24,045?
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say?
I think you said
24, so
24,000.
it'd just
Okay,
be
$45,000 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account Fire Dispatch Overtime. I don't know how I got that. So, did everybody receive the backup information on this? Okay. There's always a shortage that needs to be filled. So this is how it's being filled at this point, unfortunately. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. And then I just wanted to say that the public hearing for the next motion is actually, I know it says May 16th, but it's actually next week. It's April 16th. I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at 8:54. Thank you.
We call the Transportation and Traffic Committee to order at 8:54. And thank you very much. And I want to, I'll save one of the things I was going to bring up for 2 weeks from now. But I would like to address from the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I would like to strike what was then the following new business referred for study and recommendation to traffic. It was a request for study and recommendation to reduce the speed limit on South Ave from Tiffany to state layout from 50 to 40 miles an hour. And Councilor Foa had, she's mentioned in here as the posted speed limit eastbound on South Ave on the other side of the 95 interchange is posted at 40 miles an hour, passing other homes located on South Ave. And it did get referred to the Traffic Study Commission. They did talk about it last week. And it is no longer posted at 40 miles an hour as you head, what is that? I'm trying to remember my directions. Down towards Tiffany Street. So that's west. Okay. It is now also 50 miles an hour. Now it is both sides 50 when you first emerge from underneath the highway. And the police department sets that. I believe the police chief has a great deal to say about the 50. And that is where it's going to stay, whether not everybody's happy, but there will be hopefully, Representative Hawkins tells us that he's hoping in 3 years that whole interchange will be redesigned. And at that point in time, perhaps we will be able to lower the speed limits that we're talking about. It certainly will narrow those roads. I will take Councilor Lavoie first.
Thank you. I just wanted to vocalize it. I think it's important, and I agree with the decision to put it to 50 or keep it at 50 rather, as I worry if we were to reduce it to 40, then we might make the state discouraged to help fix the intersection, as they may think that slowing people down might be the solution. So I would just keep things as they are and allow the state to do as they promised and update the intersection. And if they have something to say about the limit at that time, then that's perfect.
So I can respond to that. I know for a fact that Representative Hawkins has the same feelings. He doesn't want to do anything to shake this project that's coming. Councilor Foa.
And I believe this is state road. This is not something the police control. It's the state that controls it. The speed limit, the state posts, I mean, the city posts the signs, the state controls the limit. I agree with both you and Councilor Lavoie. Let's just leave it alone and let the good times come with the revised intersection.
I love that phrase. Yes, President Felicio.
Thank you, Ty. So, and Council Foa, thank you for that, because that's an important distinction to make. But the other thing is, the speed limit, I don't know, Council Lavoie, if I may, through the chair to Council.
Absolutely.
I don't know that that's what the project is necessarily about as much as it is the off-ramp and the interchange there. So we just want to make sure that we're just focusing on really what that project is, and the distinction that it's a state road and it's not a city road is huge in this situation. So my question, Council Waterman, is I'm assuming that the Traffic Study Commission said, you know what, this is fine the way it is, the sign was posted.
You are assuming correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other thoughts or questions? So I will call for a vote to strike this. All those in favor of striking?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I have an aye, so we are struck 3-0. And that concludes the business this evening. The Transportation and Traffic Committee will meet at the next appropriate time. All those in favor of concluding?
Aye, second.
Okay, thank you. 8:59.
Call ordinances, elections, and legislative matters to order at 8:59. Members of my committee include myself, Councilor Holmes, and Councilor Cobus. From the docket of October 17, 2023, I entertain a motion to call for a public hearing on May 21st, 2024 for changes to 7-8.2 of the city ordinance requesting a review and overhaul of the abatement process for non-municipal users of the city's rubbish recycle program.
Second.
Thank you. This is just a call for the public hearing for this, and there's accompanying language for the proposed ordinance change for the whole council to review up until and through the public hearing, so just wanted to make a note of that. Okay, so motion is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. In the docket of February 6, 2024, as a growing and increasingly diverse gateway city, it is important that Attleboro welcome and support residents, business owners, and visitors in all aspects across the city, and that we foster an environment that represents the many different cultures, backgrounds, and perspectives that make up our unique and dynamic community. Several residents have inquired about the creation of a diversity committee to better accomplish these important objectives, and the mayor agrees that it is time for such a committee in the city. Accordingly, the mayor respectfully requests the revised ordinances of the city of Attleboro be amended by adding the following: 2-22 Diversity Committee.
Second.
Thank you. So I just want to start by offering some comments on this. And I'll start by saying unequivocally that I do not support the creation of a diversity commission. So I'll start with that. And there's several policy and practical reasons for that, which I'll go through. Number one, I think the powers and duties of the proposed diversity committee falls under the mandate of the Council on Human Rights. I understand that there will be different opinions on this, but the city ordinance currently states that the purposes of the Council on Human Rights include diverse representation, improving quality of public discourse, eliminating unlawful discrimination. There are analogous sections, I believe, in the diversity committee language. It talks about creating an inclusive community. In the human rights ordinance, it talks about promoting understanding of diverse cultures. And the Diversity Commission proposal, it talks about fostering understanding of culture and diversity. In the Human Rights proposal, it talks about education. Diversity Commission talks about educating diverse cultures and traditions. Human Rights proposal, or ordinance rather, talks about enlisting cooperation of public and private racial, religious, ethnic, civic, fraternal, benevolent agencies. And the Diversity Committee talks about building relationships with diverse community groups. So I'm going through some of these analogous sections to show that they're very similar. And in my opinion, the mandate for the Human Rights Council is fairly broad. And I think comparing the language of both, there's substantial similarity between the two. And in my opinion, there's not sufficient difference between the mandate of the Human Rights Council and the proposed Diversity Commission to warrant the creation of a Diversity Commission. And from a policy perspective, I think this could be pursued through the creation of a subcommittee within the Council on Human Rights. So that would be a potential idea. Secondly, I think the overstated role or function of the Diversity Commission is a potential issue. I'm afraid that calling for diverse membership through race, ethnicity, country of birth, age, gender, sexual orientation, all of that implies that this criteria somehow is not already important or considered in the appointment of individuals to boards, commissions, and the hiring that the mayor undertakes right now. I trust the mayor's already considering these factors in the city's hiring practices. So I would also caution that while these factors are important, they should always be secondary to meritocracy. We should always be looking to select the best person for the job. So an overemphasis on identity can overshadow the need to make sure we're matching the right people for the right jobs. And that goes for city hired positions or volunteer positions. That's both. So this is something that we owe, I think, to the residents of the city to make sure that we're choosing the best people to lead in whatever capacity that they're put in. Third point I wanted to mention is true diversity in city government. It starts with the mayor. This is a function of how municipal government is structured. And as we all know, the mayor, as the chief executive of the city, is tasked with hiring city employees and appoints board and commission members. The ability to promote diversity within city government ultimately rests with the mayor. The evidence of how effective these hiring practices have been over time are, I think, largely reflected by the available talent pool, but also in large part by the hiring decisions made by a mayor. And in my opinion, with a diverse range of opinions, backgrounds, and experiences, considering all of those things, that's what promotes true diversity. But these are principles that must be embraced and applied from the top down in any administration to see any true diversity. And I'll tell you, I myself have personally experienced what it feels like to want to serve in the city, especially during times of need in the city, and be pushed aside when a mayor does not prioritize diversity. Under the previous administration, I offered to volunteer and serve in no less than 4 different commissions over a 3-year period. And during a time of tremendous vacancy, I was rejected each time. In one conversation, I was explicitly told that I could not be appointed because of an assumed personal viewpoint that I had. I understand mine was not an isolated example, and there are many other public examples that follow this pattern. I offer this personal example to illustrate that the promotion of diversity starts from the top down. Starting a diversity commission will not end discrimination or create diversity in and of itself. There were compelling stories told at the public hearing, and some were indeed sad, heartbreaking stories. And I understand many of the concerns expressed. I myself have been the target of insensitive comments, hurtful actions from those who are ignorant of family, ethnic, or cultural backgrounds. But creating a committee will not magically end racism or discrimination. I think teaching and living out principles of respect towards others, not just when we agree with them, but especially when we disagree, that's what will bring about civility, understanding, and productive discourse. Unfortunately, we can't eradicate discrimination. We can't eradicate racism simply by creating a diversity commission. And lastly, I'll say I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of moving forward with the diversity commission. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think it's safe to say that everyone around this horseshoe wants to see true diversity in City Hall, our boards and commissions, our community groups, in a way that reflects our diverse population. I've heard from many residents who feel the same way, but are afraid to speak out, speak at a public hearing, or otherwise because they don't think that the creation of a diversity commission will accomplish this. But they also fear being ostracized and labeled as bigots simply because they have a different opinion of how to address the issue. And I will say I personally feel that this body was unfairly criticized at that public hearing for not being diverse enough, simply on the basis of skin color. Ironically, this was the very injustice that Martin Luther King Jr. fought against during much of his lifetime. While it's fair game, and I would say incumbent on the voters of Attleboro to call out elected officials for decisions they make as public servants, it's wrong to criticize individuals who sacrifice countless hours away from their families, their careers, open themselves up to public scrutiny, and throw themselves wholeheartedly into thankless work to try to make our city a better place simply because of the color of their skin. And I fear that the creation of a diversity commission could inadvertently lead to other forms of the very issue that it seeks to address. So for these reasons, I do not support the creation of a diversity commission and would encourage my fellow committee members to vote against this motion. Does anyone have any comments, concerns? Councilor LeBlanc?
I agree with the point of, I would like to see it as a subcommittee. So whether that means that the body, your committee has to vote it down and then reintroduce it as a subcommittee, I firmly support that. I asked questions during the public hearing to which no one really could identify the difference in the committees. In meeting with the mayor even talked about the idea of changing the name from the diversity committee to another name. So I feel like the committee was kind of just thrown at the body. There wasn't a lot of fortification behind it. I mean, if this is the diversity committee and the mayor wanted to change the name on it solely because of the issue around the name, then clearly there's an issue at hand. And I don't want to discredit the Human Rights Committee in the work that they do by introducing a committee to do the same job so that we can have two sets of people trying to come to a conclusion on one idea. So I think a subcommittee would do a great job at ensuring that the Human Rights Committee is in fact diverse and making the proper calls to the council. And that's my comments.
Councilor Holmes and Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you. I really appreciate your thoughts on this. I'm open to the subcommittee as well, and I also think the administration kind of was saying, well, I'm going to let them define what they're going to do themselves. It was very vague, and it seemed to me like there was a lot of overlap, and no one seemed to have an issue with that. But at the same time, I do think that they could be both working on something in a different way. There could be one person applying for a grant in one committee, and then the other committee also applying for. It just seemed very not thought out here. So I'm okay being the vice, keeping it in committee, and potentially getting the clarification. Is there a way to rework this? Is there a way to change the human rights to include, to kind of just understand a little bit from our point of view, what is the difference here? Especially when you're reading the definition and it's like, it's sounding so similar. I appreciate the public hearing and all the individuals that came forward to support this, but we do have to understand what does make this different than some of the other committees that we already have. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Well, first, I just want to really applaud your honesty, sincerity of expression and your comments. I mean, they were great. And I'm in line with what you are also saying. You know, we had something similar like this come up with the, and some of you may remember it, the flag raising issue, who could put a flag up on certain times of the day. And the mayor ended up working it out by following suit with what they do at the federal level. And that's what was worked into our flag portion of when and how flags can fly in the city. And I happened to look this up, diversity, cultural, human rights, and federally, under human rights is cultural and diversity. There are subcommittees underneath. They follow human rights. They're all about human rights. And that's the way that it's listed. And I think, again, I go along with you, and your sincerity was unbelievable, that sometimes always trying to address every single concern of every single person, identifying these separate groups separates people more. They don't find a way to work together. We're people. We're all people, human beings, and everybody should be treated with the same respect and caring, because that's what should happen. And it's not going to happen just by adding in more and more committees or commissions. I do believe this is something, as well as the Cultural Committee, that it belongs under human rights. And those are my comments. And again, Jonathan, I thank you. It was great.
So, being on the Council on Human Rights, I have several comments about this. I think having it as a subcommittee to the Council on Human Rights is too much. Again, it will separate the Council on Human Rights. It's only 9 people, and I don't know if that would be something that they could put together to have a subcommittee on. I think that also that Council on Human Rights is a reactive body, so that when things happen, they react and then they create things to bring people together. The diversity committee is supposed to be something that's proactive and including people in things that happen in the city. And you're right, it does start with the mayor, and she wanted to include this diversity committee to include a diverse population in things that happen in the city. And the diversity committee is also supposed to provide suggestions and ways to create that diversity and inclusion in the city. So hopefully things like the rejection that you experienced won't happen again. And the unintended consequences, I don't understand what those would be in my head, but anyways, I think that it's something that will help bring more people together, and with more people to do that, with people to do an inclusive first step of bringing people into the events and into the city. Those are my
Councilor
comments.
Paul.
I appreciate your comments. I don't entirely agree with them. One of the things that I heard at the public hearing was that there are significant segments of our community who are not reached currently by Human Rights Commission, by us, by the city. They don't know about things, and had expressed genuine, I think, hopes and aspirations that this committee would have the effect of reaching those communities and bringing them into our larger community of Attleboro. And I think that's very important. We don't want it to be that because you don't live near Capron Park, you don't know about events that are happening there. And that was one of the things that struck me particularly about what was said at the public hearing. The other thing that you said that I probably do not agree with is that we always want the very best person for the job. That sounds great, and I'm not proposing, contrary to what happened in the United States Senate 50 years ago, I'm not proposing mediocrity in any job. But I think all that's required is that someone be able to do the job. And then beyond that, we can look at diversity. We can look at a variety of people from a variety of communities who might be able to do the job. We don't have to look for the very best. It's enough that we figure out for a particular job, for a particular vacancy, for a particular volunteer position, what characteristics we want. Then, whenever we find that, there may be a variety of people who meet that. And that is a way of enlarging those who participate. So I think there's a bit of a red herring in looking always for the very best, when what we need is a person who can do the job, and we need to be clear about what the job is, or the mayor needs to be clear about what the job is. And then it can be filled by anyone who's able to meet those characteristics. I think that would broaden the types of people in our community who would be qualified for jobs. Perhaps, I understand your point about the language overlapping between the Human Rights Commission and the Diversity Commission, and perhaps what we should really do is go back and look at this language, refine this language, revise this language to reduce the overlap and to make absolutely clear those proactive and other aspects of a diversity committee that we want to see in the city that are not covered by the Human Rights Commission.
Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. So I appreciate your feelings and your honesty. But I don't know why we would agree to have this as a subcommittee. I mean, it doesn't seem like everybody's being honest in the sense of that it's the overlap. So I think it's in the name. I think it's the word diversity that's bothering a lot of people. And, you know, when you talk about the human rights about mistreatment, discrimination, and diversity is about unifying people and bringing people together. And, you know, you had stated, and I don't remember exactly your words, but about, you know, it's not going to be a magic bullet, like, for any type of rights to have this commission. And I agree. I mean, look at what's happening to women's rights, and it's 2024. So no, we're not going to end racism, bigotry, misogyny by having this diversity committee. But as Council Foa said, it's about bringing people together. It's about unifying people and making everybody feel like they're a part of this community. Because, you know, there were some stories that people were saying at the public hearing that they didn't feel part of this community. And it's not just about us, you know, appointing people to commissions or committees, and it's not just about hiring practices. It's way more than that. And I, you know, when Council Home talks about, you know, overlapping as far as, you know, grants and such, I assume they would work together and they would, you know, touch base with each other and such. So, I mean, I don't know how making it a subcommittee would change anything about the way anybody feels about the true nature of this new committee that they want. And a lot of our committees already and commissions overlap in their goals and their language. I just don't agree that creating a committee like this would defeat its purpose and make it worse. Let's see. I tried to write some notes really quick. So anyway, I don't see the harm in creating this committee. I do not see the harm in making people feel represented and part of this community and welcomed and embraced. And, you know, I realize it's not going to end everything, but I don't see any harm in it whatsoever. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. One I want to state is I am very proud of you on what you said. You had the guts to say how you felt. You did a lot of research on it, and in a short time, you've come a long way, and you've done a great job as a councilor, and I applaud you for that. And thank you very much. And I think everybody's got a lot of really good points. And so I've had people that were on the Human Rights Committee that are no longer there. So I'm generally a counselor that is all about compromise in a lot of ways, for right or wrong. But I've had people on the Human Rights Committee that are no longer on there and then felt that they really needed a diversity committee. Council Foa had some really good points too on, well, the points that I liked where you said were maybe there could maybe tweak it a little bit or maybe make a couple changes, kind of like that too as well. And I've also had a bunch of calls with people saying, what are we doing here? So it's kind of been all over the place, but you really did your research, you really did a great job, and I'm very proud of what you said, and you really had the guts to do it, and so thank you. But I think everybody had a lot of good comments and everything, and maybe I think I'm for it, but like I said, back to Council Foa's decision, maybe there's some things that we could tweak it so that it separates it a little bit, so that it serves a little bit, definitely a different purpose than what the human rights is, so there isn't that overlap and stuff. I could be wrong, and I'm certainly open for suggestions and stuff, but again, great job.
Yes. President Delicio.
Thank you. So, Jonathan, first of all, thank you for your vulnerability, right? Sharing what you've gone through as the only person of color, I think the first person of color to serve on this council. I think we should be listening to a lot of what you said, because you're going to walk a road that none of us ever have. So I think it's a courageous discussion to have. I have family members in my immediate family that are mixed race, and I've seen and felt their pain. I understand what it is when you said insensitive comments. That's probably the nicest way of putting it. I think that this is certainly a courageous discussion for this body to have, because those who come out against it are going to be labeled as bigots. They're going to be labeled as insensitive. That's not the case. I don't know that this has, the way this is constituted right now, I don't know that this is the answer. I think we need to talk about how do we bring a community together truly. And I think we have to have full transparency. It has to be fully inclusive to represent everybody in the city. I think that I want to see in a committee like this, I don't think the name of it, Diversity Commission, doesn't tell me a lot, right? I want to know what the goals are. What are the true goals? What are the milestones? How are we going to get there? How do we, as community leaders, work with other community leaders to really get an idea of what's going on? I've heard both sides of this too, as Councilor Angelo said, and thank you for bringing that up. I think we really need to have the conversation, and we need to take an active lead if we really want to see change. You know, Councilor Reynolds talked about people treating people with respect. We should be treating people with respect, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. You know, can't wait to see, as soon as the articles run in the paper about this, the way we're all getting chewed up on by either side on Facebook. It's not respect. It's not respect. We're going to do something like this to make a substantive change. It's got to be well thought out. It's got to be more than just a public hearing. I'd like to see, and you know, I was disappointed when the mayor said, well, no, they're going to figure out what the charge is. We need to do this together. If we're going to be true city leaders and we're going to be agents of change, we need to do this together. And we need to understand that it's, Peter Blair used to say this all the time, disagree without being disagreeable. The art of a respectful conversation is gone. Nothing breaks my heart more than disrespect and hatred, and it's everywhere. But I think that one committee that just talks in generalities and says, we'll figure it out as we go, it's not good enough. We've got real problems. We've got real people getting hurt every single day. And we need to do something that's going to make a change. Council Sawyer, I was disappointed to hear that the Council on Human Rights is reactive. I would hope that they'd be more proactive to bring some of these concerns to the council. I understand what you're saying, I certainly do, and you know, there's a lot that we have to react to. I don't know if a subcommittee is the right idea, but I think that different thinking on this is something we should explore. But I think it's got to be more this community leaders. We need to come together. We need to stand up and we need to say, you know what? Racism, bigotry, hatred, homophobia, any of it, it's not okay. And we need to decide what kind of community we want to be. But just because we might not agree with this one piece of business, I don't want the narrative to be the council's racist. The council is bigots. The council doesn't care. Because I don't think that's anything that anyone said here tonight. I'm getting just the opposite. We're a council who has a voice. We should be using our voice to find a way to end racism, find a way to end hatred. I like the idea. I don't like the way this is set up here. I think we can do more and we can do better and we can make our voices heard. I can't support this in this form, which doesn't mean that I don't support it. I agree with what Councilor Holmes said, keep it in committee and let's flush it out. Let's make a proposal that this council can be proud of, where we are truly inclusive and we invite everyone to be part of this city. A city that, you know, we put ourselves out there every single day that we're proud of, that I know that the residents are proud of. And then we send it back to the mayor to either approve or veto. Maybe we can send it down. I'd love to see collaboration, but we've got to find something that's going to really be able to make a difference, that has goals and that has milestones. Thank you.
I feel like I'm following Senator Feeney in a speech.
It's a compliment. Thank you.
Well, you understand. First of all, you did bare your soul, and I admire that tremendously. I cannot look at the world in the way you visualize the world in some ways, I'm sure. I too have a sister-in-law who is a different color and from a different culture. And and my family has struggled parts of my family, struggled with that for a while. I worked in a culture that was, for 25 years in Boston, in Roxbury, that was very mixed culturally. I have always viewed Attleboro as almost an ideal city to do it right. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're evolving. The mixture in our city is still relatively small of cultures. But I see this committee, it has to be mixed culturally in itself. And that's why I asked the question, do you think people with disabilities, for example, should be on this? And I think a few people, not the majority, people that look like me should be there too. I see this commission, I guess I'm calling it a committee at this point because I don't think we're quite to the commission level yet, as a welcoming source of how to welcome people from all backgrounds that want to come here to it. I also see them working very closely with with the committee, the Human Rights Committee, very, very closely. I don't think I want it to be a subcommittee, though. I think I want it to be a sister-brother committee. They will have a lot in common, and I absolutely agree with you that we have to write it ourselves. We have to create what this committee is going to be. And I would think that I want you to be a very big part, if we do go forward, of creating it. And I'd love to hear your vision. If we have it, how would you create it? And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So again, the biggest piece is that the administration heard from our residents, and we did too from the public hearing, that there's a need here. But then when we're looking at the two human rights and the diversity committee, the definitions are the same. So when we were talking earlier about feel-good legislation, just trying to do things that feel good, but maybe like it needs a purpose. And so I think making sure that it's different enough, and I'm just wondering if you don't mind potentially doing some research around other communities that have human rights, diversity, cultural, like how are other communities managing the different needs, and what does that look like? Because it's not about the word, I don't know, Councilor Dolan had mentioned that she feels like some people may have an issue with the word diversity. It has nothing to do with that, but just who would create something that's the same definition as something we already have? It needs to be different, which I think we can get there, but it doesn't, if we're reading it and it's the same thing, why would we, what is the purpose of this? And when we kind of were asking the administration, it was, they're gonna kind of define it themselves. Well, shouldn't we be kind of taking a leadership role in helping define this? I don't know, but that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Holmes, that actually was part of what I was going to say about how we could help create it. There definitely is a need. I think the definition and how they look the same, I think because we didn't have one before. So the things on the Council on Human Rights have those same type of bylaws, for lack of a better word, because I don't think they're actually bylaws, but if we have to pull them apart so that we can put some of the things on the diversity committee, keep the things on the Council on Human Rights. And I think that because, like I said, there wasn't one before, so we had to put it all in the one that we have. And I wanted to make a comment about your reactive comment, and I think that it's only because as things happen, that's when the Council on Human Rights does things, and maybe the reactive was not the word I wanted to say, but and it kind of felt, it didn't feel right. But anyway, because they want to make sure that, things, that people are included because of their differences. And yes, it does sound like a diversity type of thing, but as you saw from the people who came to the public hearing, they were mostly mixed race people and people who wanted to have it for that reason because they didn't feel included, even in a Council on Human Rights. So that's something that we need to create, and that's Oh, I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. My comments are going to be kind of here, there, everywhere, but the last three appointments we had on the Human Rights Committee were people that spoke about driving diversity, being proactive, engaging the community. So we're kind of touching on that's the role that they should fill, when we're doing a disservice if we appoint Mr. Matos, who specifically mentioned this public hearing, mentioned the committee, who his goal is to go out and engage people that are, a diverse community. So I think by putting this through, we're just doing a disservice to the people we appointed that told us that's their passion, that's why they're here. And then I also, again, I think that with it being a subcommittee, it should fill the voids that the Human Rights Committee can't do on its own, or if we reintroduce it, it should be something to where this committee should handle the shortcomings of the other committee, and they should be working hand in hand like a brother and sister committee. It shouldn't be the same goal or the same process. It should be very different to have one unifying decision. And I had something else and I can't remember off the top of my head, so if it goes around, I'll come back.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. And please, President Delicio, stop me if I'm wrong here. In the public hearing, we had a couple people that were very outspoken. We had Patricia Belfield. She felt that there were some things and she's on the Council on Human Rights, and she felt that there were some things that kind of really needed to be tweaked. And then we had Walter Viva, who I personally known Walter for a long time. Walter was on the Council on Human Rights, and he spoke in favor of the Diversity Committee. And I actually met with Walter for several hours one night to try to understand it, because I had been told on a state level, I never fact-checked this or anything, that on the state level in Massachusetts, Council on Human Rights and the Diversity Committee is all one. I could be wrong, but I don't know, so don't quote me on that. And I don't know if it's even possible that, we get, others involved too, as well as deciding this on a couple of the very outspoken people like Walter and Patricia, and get their concerns, and then obviously get the mayor, because she plays a big part in this too, and get the council, and maybe we come up with some, groundworks along with Councilor Tavares, because he does a, great job in, writing ordinances and everything, and it might be just something that we could possibly do. And that's about all I have.
A couple different things. So first, that would totally be up to, I think that's the collaboration piece would be great. The mayor, the people who spoke at the public hearing, but that's up to Councilor Tavares, how he wants to proceed with that while this is in his committee. Through the chair to Councilor Sawyer. Laurie, please accept my apology if I came across in any way. I stand behind the Human Rights Commission. The work that they do is fantastic. I was just kind of struck by the word. I meant no offense by any stretch. I mean, they do great work, but I think that there's still some overlap that we need to be able to look at through this. So, thank you.
So there were several people that talked about, subcommittees and whatnot. And as I said, at the federal level, there's the Human Rights Committee, and Cultural and Diversity are in it. And I would suggest that if that's the route that we decide to go, we could always increase the human rights from 9 to 15, so that there's people in different areas of it under human rights. It doesn't have to be 9 people. That can always be addressed as well and be increased, because there's so many subsections under there. And that's all I wanted to say.
I did remember my final ending point there. I just think that something we should decide collectively to vote 11-0. I think as it sits today, it seems like it's going to be 6-5 either way, and I think we do a disservice to not only the committee but everyone that put in some effort here to come out and have such strong tie down to a vote. I'd love to see the council put out something to where we can all decide 11-0 and actually send out the proper statement. I think the statement that we want to make with this is not going to be made if it's coming out 6-5 either way. I think 11-0 is the proper way that it needs to come out, and that's my comments.
Further comments? Well, I appreciate the the comments, and there's a couple things that I wrote down. I purposefully did not say anything while all the other counselors spoke to hear that feedback. But I mean, I can say unequivocally, as a standalone committee, it's not something that I'm going to support, regardless. So we can go back to the drawing board and revise the language, but in principle, it's not something that I would be willing to support. So that being said, my preference would be to vote it down, and if the council's feeling is to add a subcommittee to human rights or somehow explore revamping that or some other piece of business, I think that's an entirely different piece of business that should be considered separate from this. That's my personal opinion. And just a couple of comments. I know several people brought up the idea of, part of the reason behind the Diversity Commission is to bring together different parts of the community, and is not necessarily about diversity just in city government, on boards, commissions. And my response, quite respectfully, is then what's the point of the Diversity Commission? I mean, part of this is we're creating a sanctioned commission on behalf of the city. And if its purpose is not to promote diversity within city government, then why does this need to be a sanctioned board? Why can't this just be a community group? So that's my opinion. Councilor Holmes, I know you mentioned perhaps keeping this in committee and maybe revising it. So that's why I brought up the comments that I did. So regardless of how this looks, I don't think it's something that I'll support again as a standalone measure, as a standalone committee, I should say. Those are my thoughts. So yes, Councilor Purpose.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. My one, and I'm still not sure where I stand on this, and appreciate your comments, and I do tend to be a little bit insensitive myself with the military service and stuff like that. But the one thing I wanted to say is that I do think this deserves being either we keep it in committee and rework it, or we should vote it out of committee and allow the full council to vote on it. I don't think this is something that should be killed in committee. So my advice would be that when we're ready, that we vote it out of committee and allow the full council to vote on it. Because one of the things that I very much believe is that things, especially things like this, that people are so opinionated on, should be allowed to have the full council vote on it, and shouldn't be just killed with 3 committee members. So that would be my suggestion.
I appreciate that comment, and that is something that I would definitely be willing to do, and let the whole council have a vote on it. So this doesn't end up being something that's restricted in committee for 3 of us to have a say on, while the rest of us sort of sit here and listen to this discussion. So I would be willing to do that. If the other members of the committee would be willing to pass it through committee to allow the full council to.
Yeah.
Councilor Holmes?
Thank you. So we would either need to keep it in committee to rework it. I hear what you're saying. You're saying this isn't something that you feel like in any form you could be agreeable to, but we would either need to, in committee, rework the language, do the work, and then release it. If we release it now, to Councilor LaVoie's point, I do think that it will be, I'm not really sure where it will go. So there's something to consider here. Do my comments make sense? Or
No, they do. They do. And I just want to make clear, and I want to be honest about where I am on this, because I've thought about this long and hard. Lots of people have asked me about this piece of business for weeks. And so, I think every piece of business that comes across the committee should receive the due respect it's deserved. And this is where I've come to a conclusion on. So I think those are really the only 2 options that I see. For me personally, I would either vote this down in committee or be willing to allow it to pass committee, but wouldn't vote in favor of it in the full council for purposes of allowing input from the whole council at that point. So that's where I stand. President Delacio?
So you're in an unfavorable position, where you're the chair of a committee where there's a very important piece of business in your committee. You have to choose, do I bring it out? Do I keep it there? There's times, and we'll all see this in our career, where there's something in our committee that we might not be fully in favor of. My suggestion, take it or leave it, is you got an awful lot of good feedback from your peers today. You can try to, I think it's worthy of the conversation, because if it comes out of committee tonight, and should it fail on the floor next week, we're in a situation where we have to start all over again. Business has to come down, public hearings, discussion. Is it a situation where we're kicking the can down the road? Maybe. I would suggest, and again, take it or leave it, keep it in committee, have some conversations, bring some other folks down. It's one night of conversation. So it's totally up to you. It's, like I said, it's an unenviable situation. But there's been times where we've had to usher discussions about topics that we might not agree with in its current form. So, just kind of my 2 cents.
Councilor LaVoy, Councilor Hall.
Again, not on this committee, so I tend to echo President Delacio, where my take, the right approach is to keep it in committee, maybe look into the subcommittee route, and effectively maybe we vote it down in committee when we know we're going to reintroduce a subcommittee. I just think letting it go to the floor, potentially to die, again, sends a wrong message. And I also think voting, I just think that we should have something in place to vote it down instead of just voting it down in committee with zero next step and leaving the question mark there, as well as letting it go to die on the floor. I think, keeping it in committee, speaking to appropriate parties and seeing if a subcommittee is feasible, introduce it, and then vote this down if that's the route that, that's decided. Otherwise, if a subcommittee is not feasible, then we decide to vote it out and see how it plays out on the floor, and we can say that we tried everything that we needed to try.
And if I could just ask President Delacio, Councilor LaVoy, do you have ideas of parties who you think would be ideal to speak to this issue?
If I may,
That's Jonathan's
I would like to get a grasp of what the Human Rights Committee feels on it, and just at the public hearing, a couple members of the Human Rights Committee that spoke, and people that wanted to be on this committee, when I asked questions about how they would coincide together, there was no concrete understanding at all. It was more like, oh, we'll try to work together. So I think that, we should maybe feel it out, and, as Councilor Reynolds mentioned, hey, if we bump you to 15 and then we create the subcommittee, is that more beneficial to the public than to have just two committees kind of just operating rogue? And that's my take.
Councilor Fuller, Councilor Smith.
I would like it to stay in committee. I would like to offer suggestions. I don't think that the subcommittee route is the only one. I think there are other routes, and we've heard them. I think the point that Councilor LaVoy made of a simple cold rejection, even if I understand why you're against this, but I think in light of the public hearing that we held and the community interest in this committee, would be harsh and is not necessarily warranted. I understand your position that it is really only about how we function in city government, but not, as I see it, how city government reaches out to other people. And I think we could come up with language that does that, and I would like the opportunity to help work on that, massage this, create suggestions, work with you. I'm not quite sure what you were asking about when you were asking who President Delacio and Councilor LaVoy had in mind, but anyway, if you're looking for volunteers,
Well, just to respond to that comment, President Delicio had mentioned perhaps keeping this business within the committee and perhaps exploring having different people come to speak in on the matter. So that's I was getting at where that might go, taking it in that direction. That was more or less what I was soliciting. Yes, Councilor.
I actually have a suggestion for somebody to come in. And actually, the current chair of the Council on Human Rights came and spoke at the public hearing, did a very good, spelled out how she felt it would be different for the Diversity Committee. And you can bring her back to have her talk again about what she thinks and how it would be different, a different committee than the Council on Human Rights.
Just from having been on the council a certain amount of years, I would have to agree with Council President Delicio that moving it back into committee, I mean, you see the diversity of comments here, just alone, everyone having their opinion about what it is. I, like you, do not like the way it was written, that it's so similar to just human rights, and that it makes no sense to me why we are creating these additional offshoots. And if they belong in one, I think we all should research that and try to figure out why there are so many that are combined within the city, not this city, but other cities and states, as well as the federal government, and understand why they think those should be in line. That is something that if it went back to committee, it could be readdressed, rediscussed. Does it even belong in there? Should it be separate? Because right now, I'm in agreement with you as to the way it reads, and I'm not comfortable with that, so I would have to say no. Not because I don't think maybe it's needed, but where is it needed, and how is it needed, and are we missing that particular point? So sending it back to committee is just basically saying, I think, to the general public, the people that we're trying to represent, is that, we're going to take another look at it. It's not going to linger there. We brought it out once. We've got a ton of comments tonight as to how we think it might go forward. And that's doing your job. So we're putting it back in. We're going to relook at it, and we might come out with a different version and still not be in agreement, and we'll have to see where that falls as well. But I think tonight it's clear that there's disagreement in a lot of avenues of what we're reading here and moving off into a direction we don't want to move off into. So from my own personal opinion, I would suggest that we bring it back to the committee and have some time to refocus on it and maybe make some changes, and then maybe those won't even be enough. We don't know. But as it reads right now, I'm not in favor of it either. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Just touching on Councilor Sawyer's statement. I do agree that the current chair did have a lot of insightful points. I think the problem I have is it's not in the language. That's the issue I have, and I think what majority of the people saying to keep it in committee or not to vote it out tonight are saying is the language does not demonstrate essentially the outcome that was presented, and I think until it does, then we're doing a disservice moving it out otherwise. Reading over the language as people were talking again, it's not different, and the points that were made really aren't in here, and I'd like to see them in here to be able to say, yeah, let's vote this thing out, and they're just not here, and I think that's the problem that a lot of the councilors here have.
Thank you. So I think there's a couple options. I would like to do my own research around what I was asking about, like how other communities are handling these different commissions, how they're written in other communities. So I would like an opportunity to do that. So I do think we should keep it in committee. And there's also an opportunity if you're feeling like this really isn't something that you're drawn to do, we could always potentially discharge it and have it go into another committee where a chair is willing to take this on and is motivated and energized to do that. And again, to Councilor LaVoie's point, I just didn't hear the difference in terms of how this is going to be separated from human rights. So I think, yeah, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments. I mean, in my line of work, words matter. So from a policy standpoint, I just don't see the effectiveness, of course, the way it's written now, which I understand several counselors agree with, but I would go a step further, which several of my other points addressed, which have to do with the philosophical aspect of I don't see how this promotes diversity in the city in a way that we can affect it with the jurisdiction that we have, the way that I see it inside of city government. So I know there have been comments about the ability of this commission to perhaps reach out to the community. It's a fair point. I just don't think that would be the right function, in my opinion. And so I would be open to other ideas of perhaps moving this in a way that's fair for the rest of the council to consider. But again, I want to be honest about what my conclusions are at this point. I don't want to lead anyone on, the council, in one direction or another that's not true, or the public, right? So I've made my statements known, and some people are going to agree with me. I'm going to hear some things tomorrow too, right? So others are not, and I understand that. But I think part of being a good counselor is being straightforward with the public about what your views are on things, and let them decide at the end of the day. So, but to get back to the matter at hand, I'd be open to keeping it at least in committee for now, and then deciding what to do with it so that we're not making a rash decision tonight. So I'd be open to that. Would you rescind your second?
Yes,
Councilor
I would.
Holmes? Okay, thank you. All right, well, that concludes the business for ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. And special committee for tax, or I'm sorry, I forgot to adjourn. Okay, I call for adjournment at 9:55.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're adjourned. And now I will cancel the special committee for tax abatement. Thank you.
We have no new business for classification compensation, and call for meeting at next appropriate time.
With respect to the special committee on rules and procedures, I convene it at 9:56. Let me start by asking Councilor Kobus whether you have a revised version of procedures.
I did. I was able to put that together based on
The committee's discussion.
the discussion.
Thank you. And you have copies for all members of the committee?
That's it.
Okay, could you pass that to Counselor Holmes? I think it's important to have an opportunity to review the revised version, and I would ask not only that we review it, but President Delicio, may we ask the solicitor to review the revised provisions that we've considered?
I think that's prudent.
Thank you. That being said, I move to adjourn the,
Second.
All those in favor?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The committee is adjourned at 9:57. Thank you.
Good job tonight,
Yeah,
everyone.
good job. It was a lot.